Right, we'll make a start. Health and safety announcement. There's no fire alarm drill anticipated today. If the fire alarm sounds, please leave the building through the nearest fire exit by following the running man signs above the doors. Make your way to the rear of the car park. The organiser of the meeting will tell you when it's safe to return. Toilets are available in the building, in the stairwell. Water is available from the water cooler in reception. And finally, please make sure all phones are muted or turned off, which I haven't done. Thank you. Right, that's that done. Right, good morning. I'm the chair, Councillor Eileen Wragg, and I welcome you to this Planning Committee meeting on Tuesday, the 9th of June 2026. Sitting to my right is Vice Chair, Councillor Steve Hunt. Supporting officers present today are Wendy Ormsby, Development Manager, Damien Hunter, Planning Solicitor, and Wendy Harris, Democratic Services Officer. Presenting officers for today for the applications will be Wendy Ormsby, Jeremy Ebden, he's not here at the moment.
It's Jack Richards.
Oh, Jack Richards instead of Jeremy. No, Jeremy's not here yet. And Sarah Leake Groves, Conservation Officer. The meeting today is being streamed live to the Council's YouTube account. So can I remind all members and officers contributing to the meeting to use a microphone or your comments will not be heard. We will now start the meeting by doing a roll call of committee members and declarations of interest. Wendy.
Thank you, Chair. I'll start with yourself, Councillor Wragg.
Yes, and I think I'm present, and I think I speak for all members when we say we've been lobbied on the Millwater School site, that is former Millwater School. Application 251259 is a major full application, former Millwater School, Honiton. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Chair, Councillor Hunt.
Present, and I have the same declaration as Councillor Wragg.
Thank you. Councillor Brian Bailey.
Present, Wendy, and been lobbied on Millwall School site.
Thank you. Councillor Barlow.
Present, Wendy, and nothing to declare that I'm aware of other than what's already been said.
Thank you. Councillor Bloxham.
Present, Wendy. Only the lobbying that's already been indicated, but also 252502 I wasn't at the last meeting, I wasn't at the site visit, so I'm aware that I won't be able to contribute to that item. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Colin Brown.
Present, Wendy, and just the same as everybody else, basically.
Thank you. Councillor Davey.
Present, and no other declarations. And I've just realised how many members of this committee start with B. Remarkable.
Thank you. Councillor Gazzard.
Present. Thank you, Wendy. No further declarations, only to highlight that I didn't attend the site visit for item 8 due to health and safety reasons, so I won't be partaking or voting in that debate.
Thank you. Councillor Hughes.
Yeah, present, and the same declarations, Wendy. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Councillor Smith.
Present, no further declarations.
Thank you.
Thank you, Wendy. can I start the meeting by thanking the former chair of this committee, Councillor Ollie Davey, who's chaired the meeting for the last 2 years, is it? It seemed longer. It always does. But anyway, thank you very much, Ollie. Ollie was always gave every application considered thought, and he did a lot of work on it before the meetings. So thank you, Ollie. Your service was greatly valued, I think, by all members of this committee. Thank you very much. Right, we start the meeting now, proper. Agenda item 1, registered speakers, and the speakers for today's planning applications can be found on page 4. Item 2, minutes of the previous meeting. Is it members' wish that I, as chair, sign the meeting minutes on the 12th of May as a true and accurate record, please? Agreed. Thank you. Sign those now. Thank you. Item 3, apologies. Wendy?
Yes, we've had 6 apologies from Councillor John Heath, Councillor Hugh Hoodie, Levine, Councillor Sarah Chamberlain, Councillor Maddie Chapman, Councillor Mike Howe, and Councillor Bethany Collins.
Thank you. Item 4, declaration of interest. No further declarations. Item 5, matters of urgency. There are none. Item 6, items to be dealt with after the public have been excluded. There are none. Item 7, planning appeals statistics. That's pages 10 to 29. Update from Wendy Ormsby, Development Manager. To you, Wendy.
Good morning. So just looking through the appeals decided, there's not been a large number, but I think the ones of note, so looking at the first, I think it's just looking at a little bit of an indication of sort of how inspectors are starting to, well, not starting, but are looking at things at the moment. So the first appeal on the list there, 250180 OUT, land south of Knights Lane, All Saints, which was an outline application for proposed self-build. The inspector acknowledged that there was conflict with the local plan, and there was some harm, some landscape harm arising from the development, but gave significant weight to the housing land supply shortfall in deciding to allow that appeal. Similarly, the next one, 250057 OUT, land adjoining West Hayes at West Hill, which was an outline application for 9 dwellings. You may recall that one because it was one that came to Planning Committee. It was an officer recommendation to approve. Committee resolved to refuse on grounds relating, I think, principally to, well, the principle of development, but potential impact, harmful impact on trees and biodiversity. And again, the inspector acknowledged policy conflict in terms of being outside the built-up area boundary, but acknowledged that the site was relatively well located in terms of access to the facilities in West Hill. That application was allowed. A cost application was refused. And then we touched on it briefly at last committee, land at Ottery Road, Fennerton, 250509 MOUT. That was an outline application for 85 dwellings on an unallocated and site at Fennerton, not one of the proposed sites in the emerging local plan. And that application was dismissed with the inspector acknowledging the effectively the landscape harm that would be arising from there, and also giving weight to our sort of strategic policy approach to location of development, acknowledging the quantum of development that's already been approved or is pending approval at Fennerton, with resolutions to approve and other recent scheme allowed at appeal. And the inspector felt that this effectively was going to be too great a quantum of development for Fennerton at this time, combined with the other issues raised in the council's reasons for refusal. So that application was dismissed. And I think in terms of anything else, again, with a similar situation, 251588, which was the Coombe Dairy Annex. Again, the inspector acknowledging policy conflict, but giving weight to the lack of housing land supply in allowing that appeal. We did have a certificate of, so 250649 CPL, which was Bridwell Cottage at Hawkchurch, Axminster, which was an appeal against refusal to grant a certificate of lawfulness for all proposed repairs to a cottage. And I would say, if you have any interest, I would recommend having a look at the reports for that one, because it was one that, as officers, we found quite interesting, I suppose, is a word to use in terms of the inspector's decision to allow that appeal, because the officer view was that it was an abandoned use and effectively a ruin. Wasn't much to the building other than a chimney stack and some low-level walls, and the inspector and the site hadn't been occupied since 1970s. But the inspector took the view that the use was not abandoned, and that the repair, the effective rebuilding of it was repairs and maintenance, not in themselves requiring planning permission. So I think if you look at some of the photographs associated with that one, you might find it an interesting decision. So those are the sort of key things coming out of those particular appeal decisions. Unless anybody's got any further questions. Thank you.
Steve.
Thank you very much, Chair. It's a question for Damien next to me, really. On the flavour, as it were, of those appeals that comes across to me from the planning inspector is the precedence of our development plan over the emerging plan. I think that has some bearing on one of the applications that we've got today with regard to the use of a site. Am I right in my interpretation that much more weight has to be given to the existing development plan than the upcoming emerging plan?
Yes, Councillor, you are correct. I mean, as it goes through the various stages, it gains more weight. So we can start to give it weight as it goes through the Regulation 19 consultation, and then eventually, obviously, it'll be adopted by full council. But at that stage, until it has been adopted, then we still can give it little or no weight at this stage, I'm afraid. Thank you.
Thank you for that.
Thank you, David. Right. Any more questions on appeals? None? Okay, move on then to agenda item 8. Planning application 252502 full. And this is a redundant barn adjacent to Burnt House Cottage, Northmost Town, Sidmouth, pages 30 to 47. We had a site visit yesterday. There were 5 of us went on that site visit, and so only those 5 will be able to speak or vote. I'll hand over now to Wendy Ormsby to present the report, please.
I don't intend to go through this in detail, because obviously it was presented at the last committee. but I will just quickly, just by way of reminder, so obviously it's converting a barn to a dwelling in a sort of within a cluster of buildings related to an original farmstead in the countryside. There are a couple of updates to provide. So this was recommended to committee for refusal at the last committee for reasons, for 4 reasons, one of them including ecology, that there was inadequate information for officers to be able to assess whether there was going to be any harmful impacts on bats. Since that committee, further information has been provided to our ecologist, who is now satisfied and has withdrawn their objection, subject to the condition as originally, as proposed effectively, that development should take place in accordance with the mitigation strategy that was originally proposed. So as a consequence, the officers propose that that reason for refusal be taken away effectively, is no longer proposed as a reason for refusal to this application. There's also been one further CGI image shown, which I will come to in the presentation. So obviously we saw this on site yesterday, and these are the plans of the proposed development itself. And with obviously the key issue, just by way of reminder, being this relatively large relative to the size of the main house, because it's doubling the footprint, albeit effectively, to create a flat-roofed single-storey extension at the back and the side of the property, insertion of roof lights and changes and remodelling of the land forward of the dwelling to accommodate parking, and also you can see the parking is in here, and also to effectively reveal further a greater proportion of the building on site. This is the CGI image that has been provided. I think it was displayed briefly at site yesterday. And there were some discussions on site yesterday as to whether or not, because if we look at the photograph, you can see that this land here is sloping down. And there was discussions about to what extent this land would be regraded, because one of the reasons for refusal relate to how the development will ultimately change the appearance of the building, creating a much more domesticated appearance, and the consequential relationship with the adjoining heritage assets, adjoining listed buildings. This being it's not a listed building, but it is a non-designated heritage asset. And as set out in the NPPF, we have to give weight to the fact that it is a non-designated heritage asset. It doesn't need to be included on any specific local list in any way to gain that status. Is something that officers, in this case our conservation officer, Sarah Leet Groves, has gone through the necessary assessments to come to that view. And again, it was discussed on site by Ms. Leet Groves that the sloping, the way that the building has been built up, so it's effectively the elevations and walls higher on one end than the other, is showing the function and form of the building in terms of how it relates to the topography of the land. And what we're seeing in the CGI image is that effectively it is certainly indicated in this drawing, although not so clear when you look at the actual proposed elevations, that but this, as I said, the CGI image, whoops, I'm going the wrong way. Shows the land levelled and the building, certainly from this image, having a level a level baseline effectively, rather than continuing to follow that sort of that sloped area of the land. Similarly, the garden in front appearing to be level here. And what we haven't got here or in any of the other drawings is any details of what the parking area is going to look like in terms of levels. Again, there was discussion yesterday about how that might be managed, but looking at this drawing, I would say, and looking at this driveway which is going up here, which will come up from the road, it would indicate if that has been leveled down here, then you've got an extent of gabion. This wall, I believe, is indicated to be constructed of gabion baskets, that the parking area in front would be level also. So, I mean, again, the things that we were looking at on site yesterday were, the reason for the site visit was to look at how this relates. Well, what's the landscape impact? Because one of the reasons for refusal is impact on the national landscape, and also whether there would be any harm to the setting of this building in itself as a non-designated heritage asset, and also to the setting of the 3 listed buildings, which this would have formed part of that original sort of farm complex when it was originally built. So that's what members observed. Since obviously we saw the site in full summer plumage, effectively. So when we were standing on site, you could see nothing really through this boundary. It's obviously now in summer, but obviously this is indicating in winter the fact that there is actually quite a lot of intervisibility between this, which is a listed building, and the setting of this listed building. Obviously, if there is any adverse impact on setting of a listed building, it has to be outweighed by public benefit. Likewise, with this non-designated heritage asset, and again, there was discussion on site about the fact that the majority of the works are at the back of the building, which is true. The majority of the works would not be visible from the road in terms of the extension. All of the remodelling of the frontage you would see, but not the back. But when you're looking at heritage assets, it's we have to look at the asset itself rather than necessarily whether or not it's publicly visible. So, for example, a listed building that might be set in its own private grounds with no public access, we would still be looking very carefully at the likely impacts on that listed building, although, as I said, acknowledging this isn't formally listed. So if there's any, this again was the site that we were looking at here, Burnt House Barn, and we saw the Nissan hut across the road, and I know there were some questions raised that if this is going to be converted to a dwelling, so really how is that materially different to the changes to this barn? And you can see a bit more clearly here, the proposal to convert Burnt House Barn involves the removal of this really, quite this unsympathetic Nissan style building from the side of it. And so the development of Burnt House Barn is determined that it will enhance the listed building. And when you're looking at guidance within the NPPF on how we assess heritage asset impacts, when we're looking, for example, at paragraph 84 of the NPPF, which does give some guidance about how we should consider reuse of redundant rural buildings. Again, one of the reasons that we might be looking to allow development is where it will result in an enhancement. And that was a materially different issue in terms of how officers have viewed it. The officer view being that the development at Burnt House Barn will result in enhancement, whereas it will have a detrimental impact on this particular site today. So the recommendation remains of refusal, but omitting the reason for refusal relating to ecology. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Wendy. Right, members who were there yesterday, do you have any questions? Councillor Barlow.
Thank you, Chair. I note on your impact of the proposed works, etc., you have a matrix, and on the matrix you have on the left-hand side the value of the building. Yeah, and you say that's medium. Yep. Yep, and then on the magnitude of impact at the bottom, you say that it is moderate to large harm.
You need to turn the microphone. It's a two-way.
Can-
No, I said the harm proposed, whilst the magnitude of impact of the proposed work is considered large and very large. Large and very large, sorry. Yes.
Sorry, yes, so, sorry, large and very large. And then you say that you therefore classify it as moderate to large impact.
In accordance with the matrix, yes.
But if I read the matrix, if you go down where it says large, very large, go down, and medium across, it comes out moderate. So can you just explain that to me?
I can. It's the next one down, but it's saying moderate to large. The other one was accepted. It's very large. There's a scale. It's large, very large, or very large, which comes out to either moderate or large. So yes, I identified it as major. So yes, I put it on I put it on moderate to large. But in essence, it's harm, whether it's slight, moderate, or large. It's harm.
Sorry, I accept that, but there is a difference between moderate and large, I presume. Otherwise, you wouldn't have the other thing in there. And to get to moderate large, it has to be very large or medium. So what I'm saying is, on our thing, we've misgraded it as moderate large. It should be just moderate, which I presume then doesn't have the same protection. It would be slightly less, because otherwise, what's the point of having the next one up? That's just the question, but that clears it up. So it's in the wrong column, that's all I'm saying. It's moderate, not moderate large.
Yes, yes.
Thank you. Yeah.
And on the building across the road that we are talking about, because you talked yesterday about the feeling of the place and how it's all going to go. And I must admit, when I saw the CGI photograph, I was quite shocked, because it looks really crisp and clean and nothing like the dirty brown of the cob opposite. But of course, that isn't staying, is it? The cob opposite is going to be whitewash rendered. So it will look exactly like the other typical Devon thatch cottage, white walls or creamy walls, whatever. But it's not going to look like the building looks like now. And if we leave that building, as you state in the factors you put for the other building when it's being converted, if we were to leave that building, it would deteriorate more and would fall down, basically, and be lost forever. That was the point.
I do agree with that, and conservation is management of the historic environment, so we do like to see the buildings used, loved, because it's the only way that keeps them, as you say, a viable use. And I don't think there's an issue with the principle of this building being reused. I think it's potentially the approach to it. There could be a little bit more sensitive approach.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions? No more questions. We'll just start off by saying we'll go into debate. When I saw the building, I was struck by the size of it. It looked pretty small on the image that we saw, but actually on site, it is quite a substantial building. Now, to have something which will double in size, also on an elevated slope, it was said to me on site by somebody outside of this committee who shouldn't really have said it, and admitted that it shouldn't have been said. Did you know that the building across the road, that one, has had consent? You've given consent for that? Well, that's different. It's in a different position. This one would dominate and it would be twice the size that it is now, although it would be at the rear. But as Mrs. Ormsby has said, in the summertime, okay, when there's plenty of foliage to screen it, but in the winter, when that foliage has died off, it will be quite visible. And I have to say that I've read this very carefully several times, and I had a pretty open mind about it. But after going yesterday and then reading this report again last night, I have to say that I agree with the officer's recommendation. I believe that we have to protect our heritage. That's what makes this little, it's like a little oasis, really. And that if if you allow this development, which would go against our own policies, it would go against the NPPF, the National Planning Policy Framework, as well, regarding conservation. I believe that this could really open the floodgate, if you like. So we've had the debate previously. I'm going to propose from the chair. Chair, I'm going to propose from the chair that the officer's recommendation stands and this application be refused. Right, now we can have some debate.
Not until you get a seconder, Chair, if you want, and it's
I don't need a chair, a seconder from the chair.
It's very unusual to do this, obviously. I don't know if this is the new
Even
way.
so, we've had the debate previously. We've been on site, lots of questions asked yesterday. I think we've given this a really full hearing, a fair hearing. And now, if you've got anything to add, Councillor Barlow?
Well, yes, I totally disagree with what you're saying, basically.
Yeah, well, I think
It's-
that
it-
was evident from your comments yesterday.
Well, sorry, we weren't allowed to debate yesterday. We were
You
told that.
can.
Sorry, we can what? We can
You
debate?
can debate it. We
Well-
haven't taken the vote yet.
Not being funny, Chair, you weren't there for quite a lot of the meeting because...
I was there, I'd heard it, a lot of it before.
Well, you-
And any questions, the conservation officer was there yesterday for questions. You had your questions answered yesterday. You've had the opportunity to ask questions today, which you've done. So I think we have all the information.
Sorry, Chair, I'm not the Chair, you are the Chair, but I believe the Chair's job is to make sure everyone has their say on the
Well, I'm
committee.
allowing you to have your say.
You are going to allow me to have my say.
Well,
As I said,
you've said plenty already, Councillor Barlow, but if you want to say more.
well, can I speak now?
You've had the opportunity to speak all along. It's just that I've
Keep
had the
in.
opportunity to speak as well, for a change.
Well, unfortunately, yesterday, Chair, you did miss half of the site visit because you, no disrespect, you couldn't make it up the hill.
Be
But
careful, Councillor Barlow.
be careful of what?
Equalities Act.
I'm well aware of what the Equalities Act, I've had the training twice now. And the Equalities Act said that there is nothing to say. You couldn't go up the top. It wasn't anyone's fault. So you couldn't go to all the meeting. That's a fact.
I was there. The development manager said, I don't think there's need for you to, I wasn't going to risk injury.
I quite
going up,
agree the
but
reason.
I had all the information I needed. I don't think there was anything that could have added to what I already knew and what I've read here, the questions that I heard asked yesterday.
So, on the point of the landscape and the visibility of it, when you went to the top, you could see that it couldn't be seen from anywhere except for, agreed, the house next door in the winter months. So the landscape thing really, because it's hidden away there, I don't think really is a reason for refusal, because I don't think that is fair that you could say the way it had been tucked away around the back and the building would be allowed to be reused. And again, from the conservation officer was saying that it's important to protect, you just said, that it's important to protect our heritage. If we don't do something with that building, it will not be there. It will be lost forever. So therefore, the farmstead and the importance of the feeling of the area will be lost, or certainly the chunk across the other side of the road will be lost. I was concerned when I saw the CGI image, as I said, but then I thought, well, it is a computer-generated image. It's sharp, and it looks, when you look at it, not in keeping, not the same as the building that is there, that has the look of the cob. You can see the cob underneath it, which matches the one opposite, the actual designated heritage asset that is there. But of course, when you look at the plans of the new building that we have allowed, where they remove the Nissenham and present the building as it should be, they've changed it. The big barn doors are gone. It's glass. There's lots of windows put in it to enable it to be lived in. There is a retaining wall that is rendered at the back. And the whole building is going to be lime washed, rendered, and so it won't look like like it does now with the cob, etc. So to me, it's going to look very out of place, the building we're talking about here, because it's not going to sit well with the buildings the other side. It's going to look like it does now, brown thing. But as you could see from it, and anyone going up there, if you went to the top, you can see the cracks down the corner of the wall. There's going to be a lot of work required for that building to be kept, a lot of work. And I'm amazed they're even looking at it, to be honest. But if you want that building to survive, it's not going to be able to be done as a one-bedroom. So if we just kept it tight, as it just renewed, or just fix that building as it is, you're not going to be able to afford to do that for a one-bedroom flat. So you need to add a little bit more on there to get the value and the cost, so that they can afford to do the huge amount of work to keep that building for future generations. So my way of thinking is, if we don't allow this, it's almost looking at that building yesterday with the cracks in the corners, it's the building's last chance. And if we don't allow something to be done there, we will lose that forever. And to me, that is a responsibility that is in the NPPF and says that you should give weight to protect a building. So this isn't a criticism of officers, is it? This is just opinions as to what is the right way of looking at this. And I think we're missing a trick here of actually allowing it. If you look at the building opposite, there will be cars out front of it. That's where we're allowing the cars to park. So we can't say that the cars the other side of the road would be any different to that. In an ideal world, someone would come along with £1 million, sort the whole lot out, and it would just be left as it is. But that isn't reality. We have a job here to do to protect this going forward. So I would suggest that we don't vote for that we actually pass this, not because we're trying to ruin the countryside, because we are trying to protect something that is special, that is different, that there isn't many of them left. A proper small farmstead in a sunken area that looks very nice, in my opinion, and that, while not perfect, is better than it not being there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barlow. I think what you've said is that if we don't have this, the place will more or less fall down.
Already falling down.
Well,
Chair.
the thing is, the conservation officer has already said, in so many words, that it's not that nothing can be done with this, just that this isn't the right application for it. It's doubling the size and it would have harmful effects. Now, that's somebody who's had training, who's very knowledgeable. I don't think even you would say you're a conservation officer.
You'd be surprised what I call myself,
well,
Chair. But
I wouldn't, I don't think.
Although I agree with you, I'm not a conservation
I don't think I
expert
would, but
in any
it's
way,
not
shape,
a case of have this or it's going to fall down. This is just not the right development for that building.
Well, if you'd been to
something
the top...
else something else can be put forward.
Well,
this application, if it doesn't succeed, no doubt the applicant will come back with something else, which will be far more acceptable and far less harmful. You've already heard that somebody with the experience that our conservation officer has in her opinion, this would cause harm.
If you-
And so, yeah.
If you'd seen the top of the thing and you'd seen the damage.
It's not a conversation, Councillor Barlow.
Oh,
I'm
sorry,
just stating,
what
I
is it?
don't know if the conservation officer has anything to add on that.
Whilst I accept what you're saying about the neighbouring property across the way, and its conversion and that sort of thing, and it will change, I think it's important to note that this building is quite exposed and visible. As we've said, it's up on a bank. The bank's part of its character, which contributes to it. So there is a difference in that, and you can no way it is contrary to policy. You can't say that that site preserves the setting through policy 219 of the NPPF.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. Councillor Davey.
Thank you, Chair. For me, there are two questions here. Is it in a sustainable location and is it a sympathetic conversion? So the first one is clearly not in a sustainable location. You could walk over to the shop in Collerton Raleigh, I accept that was about a 10-minute walk, and on a nice day, if you'd run out of milk, you might do that. But for all your main shopping, you are going to get in a car and you are going to drive. If you've got children, and it's a 3-bedroom house, so it's a reasonable assumption it could be a family home. Your nearest schools are Otterton and Newton Poppleford, and there's no way you're going to be able to walk to either of those or even cycle, and therefore you're going to get in a car and drive to those. And if they require a secondary school, that's probably going to be Sidmouth. So there's going to be a lot of car use associated with that building. And is the conversion sympathetic? I don't believe so. I accept that, yeah, maybe it looks a bit crisp and modern in the CGI, but I think it would look pretty crisp and modern. And Councillor Barlow says it's the only way that house can, or that building can be preserved. You might as well not preserve it. It's going to look like a modern house. There's no sign of the original building, really. The only kind of hint of it is the outline of it and the metal roof, which is retained. But it's got this large flat-roofed extension on the back. I accept that's not particularly visible, but it still doesn't add anything to that building. It's not sympathetic. And so I don't feel it's in keeping with the setting, even though, yes, the colour would match the lime wash of the original. I've also looked at the other application, and I accept that, but that doesn't really make much difference to me. The fact that the two buildings are going to look broadly similar, it's still, you've lost the original building as far as I'm concerned. And I don't feel it's in keeping with the setting there or its countryside location. So I accept that there is a landscape impact. When you go along that road, you are going to see some old buildings. You're going to see a barn conversion that looks fairly sympathetic. It's still obviously an old building. This is just going to look like a modern house, like a new build. And I don't feel that it does anything for the location. I don't think it does anything for the national landscape. And I don't feel that it does anything for the existing building because it just won't be there anymore. It might be underneath, but you'd have to do some digging to find it. So I am going to support the officers and support refusal.
Thank you, Councillor Davey. Right, anybody else? Councillor Hughes.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Well, I support what Ian Barlow said, actually. And I really want to say, first of all, about it being visible. Really? Being visible? Well, I was given a postcode, and I followed the postcode, and I drove straight past it. I didn't even see it. because I drove to the end of where the postcode was supposed to be, and then I had to follow somebody back, and they pointed to where it was. And I couldn't even see it. So where all this visibility comes from, I really don't know. The best place you would have seen it if you flew over the top. But anyway, I've got to say, to let this building collapse would be an absolute travesty. And whilst I hear what's being said about policy, I honestly believe that some common sense should prevail. And I do support this application because I think it is going to be in keeping with the surrounding area, and especially with the work that's going to happen in the building opposite. I don't think it has that impact on the local landscape, and none detrimented to the heritage asset. Oh well. Anyway, look, I go along with you, and Barlow. I'm going to support this application. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Hunt.
Thank you very much, Chair. I understand Ian's argument about sustainable development, and he says that the building will fall down if it isn't developed according to this plan. But I think, Councillor Ragg, you've also said that another application could come forward. It's up to the developer to make sure that that is sustainable, isn't it? It's not sort of us now to decide whether any future development would be sustainable or non-sustainable. And the second point I want to make is that, as I understand from the conservation officer, the actual visibility isn't. It obviously affects, as you drive past and see it or don't see it, but the conservation issues remain whether you see it or you don't see it. It's one of those sort of questions that it's a feature, and it'll still be a feature whether you're looking at it or not looking at it. I find this one very difficult because I don't want to see the loss of the building, but I feel in the end that I shall come down on the side of the officers on this application. Thank you.
Thank you. And also the image that we saw of the completed project, the building, didn't show that the front area would be hard standing for cars. It's sort of green and gardeny looking. So now I'm not taking any more. Councillor Barlow, you spoke enough at the last meeting. You had plenty to say yesterday and today. So I'm going to take this to
Point
the
of
vote now.
order, Chair.
Thank you.
Point of order, Chair.
Damien, could you
Point of order.
Could you sum up, please?
Point of order, Chair.
I can, Chair. I think what I want to clarify from a legal standpoint, obviously this is going to be quite a finely balanced decision here in what everybody's had to say. Now, I do have to put to you, are you satisfied that you have full knowledge of the application and that you've seen enough to be able to make a fully informed decision on this?
Yes, I do.
Because you are the one who's putting the recommendation
because I did
forward.
go down, or despite what's been said, I went down on the road and I went up the side of the neighbouring property as well, while the others were at the top. So yes, I do have full knowledge. We've had detailed report, we've had photos and maps, locations. We've had lots of questions asked and answered, and from what I saw, I don't think any more would have been gained. The state of the building as it is, that is a matter for the developer. It's not a matter for us at the committee. Cracks in the walls and that, it's not a matter for this this planning committee. And yes, I do. I'm quite confident. Thank you.
Okay, Chair. Well, then on that basis, then the recommendation that you put forward is one of is refusal in line with officer recommendation. As you say, you don't need a seconder for that, so we can go to the vote unless Ms. Holmes wants to add anything. She's looking like. You look like you were poised then, Wendy, to interject with something, but I didn't want to move until you'd spoken.
Well, it was only that Councillor Barlow said he had a point of order, and I just wondered if we shouldn't hear it.
It's up to the chair, and at the end of the day, the chair doesn't want to hear it. I'm not going to say any more.
What did he say?
He said he had a point of order to raise.
Yeah.
No, I've said it several times. You heard it, Chair. I'm not going to say it. That's it.
What, point of order?
No, no.
Oh,
Point of information, sorry, Chair. Point of information, when we take the vote, can it be recorded, please?
can I ask those members who were there yesterday to vote, to ask whether a recorded vote, whether they'd be in favour of it, please? Yeah?
I think with the limited number of people who are taking part in the vote anyway, and the fact that it's obviously being live streamed, it's going to be quite
Yeah.
clear who's voted in what direction.
yeah,
But, you know, if
yeah.
you want it minuted, then I'm sure that's something that we can do as well. I am a little bit conscious now, though, Councillor Barlow, if you do have a point of order that you do wish to make, I think it should be brought out into the open before we proceed.
The chair didn't want to hear it. You've actually covered most of it. And at the end of the day, I don't know what the law is, but the point of what you said that we had to go to the meeting, you had to go to the thing. The chair couldn't see all of it, missed out on some of the debate. And at the end of the day, that's fair enough. You've clarified that, and the chair has clearly said that she is happy with her situation. So we'll leave it at that. But it's just a point that at the end of the day, I don't like being bullied, and I don't like being told what I'm, if I'm being fair and doing it. I think it's disgraceful the way we're being treated by the chair, to be honest.
Yesterday was not a debate, it was information gathering, it was asking questions, and
I
you've
realise
asked
that,
plenty of those,
which you
Councillor
couldn't
Barlow.
have seen
Can we go
all
to
of,
vote?
you couldn't have had all of the information.
I think we should now, so I'm sorry that you feel that way. I don't personally feel that there's been any bullying going on. The chair's put forward a recommendation, she's given you the opportunity to speak, you clearly disagree, you know, that's within your rights, so I think we should now proceed to the vote. So all those in favour of the motion to refuse, if you can raise your hands, please. And that's 3. And all those against, please. And that's 2. And there are no abstentions because nobody else went out on site. So that one is carried. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Move on now to agenda item 9, planning application 251259, Major Fall, former Millwater School, Honiton, Bottom Road, Honiton, pages 48 to 75. Principal Planning Officer Jeremy Ebden. Is he here
Apologies, Chair. Mr Ebden is actually engaged in a public inquiry today, so I should have let you know to update the records,
Right,
but it
are
will
you
be
going
me
to-
presenting
Yeah,
it, yes.
okay then.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mrs Ormsby.
Chair, could you please get the councillors and the vice chairman to speak into the microphone? I'm struggling to hear.
Sorry, Roy.
Okay, so this application is at the former Millwater School, Honiton Bottom Road in Honiton, and it is regarding the construction of a care home falling within Class C2 with access car parking, cycle parking, refuse, storage, landscape, boundary treatments and tree works relating to one protected tree. And this is the application site. So the site was formerly occupied by the Millwater School, but the buildings have, I think the school ceased to occupy the site from 2015. In fact, the school has relocated elsewhere, and the buildings have since, I think relatively recently, been demolished from the site. So whilst you can still see the concrete footprints, etc., there are no buildings within the site at the moment. And you can see that it's located immediately south of Littletown Primary School and is surrounded by residential development on the, immediately adjoining the east and south boundaries, and then across the road is further residential development. The site is sited well within the built-up area boundary of Honiton, where the principle of this type of development is supported by strategies 6 and 23 of the local plan. You will see that the red line follows a slightly unusual shape here because as it stands at the moment, the site is a relatively rectangular site. But this part of the site is being retained for potential future use by the primary school, I think, should any expansion, etc., be required. Hence, the site is sort of cut out. Oh, thank you. Apologies. So this is the area here that's been cut out. So as I say, at the moment, if you went to see the site, you would not see any boundary here. But that is the reason retained for the primary school. And you can see that there are, the site is quite heavily treed on the boundaries, on the southern and eastern site boundary. And those trees are protected by tree preservation orders, as are these two trees at the site entrance. And this is quite, I suppose, beneficial in the fact that there is an existing mature vegetation screen between the housing to the south and to the east, which does help to prevent issues of overlooking from this development into those housing areas. The other point to note is that the site is allocated in the emerging local plan for 30 houses. And clearly this scheme is not in line with that emerging allocation. Right, so this is showing the proposed ground floor. So the building is arranged over 3 floors. So the building effectively is designed as 2.5 and 3 stories when you look at it visually. And it is a 70-bed care home providing for a variety of different care needs, including dementia, and set in an L-shaped building, the main access being on the ground floor in this corner here. And each floor, as you will see, has a variety of individual bedrooms with ensuite bathrooms, and then communal facilities, so communal lounges and dining areas within each floor area. And you can see that again on the 3rd floor. And the layout and bedroom numbers, floor plans are designed to sort of optimize sort of maximum efficiencies in terms of how modern care homes are now currently run. This shows the elevations of the development. As you can see, there's a lot of articulation within the elevations, which is achieved through a variety of things such as gable ends, different materials. So you've got a mixture of red brick, some buff brick, some render, a standing seam zinc roof, and also the footprint, as you'll see if we actually go back and look at the floor plans, you'll see that there are various projections and indentations in the elevation, which again seeks to break up the frontage and to give it, to avoid that sort of institutionalized sort of large block building, and to try and make it more appropriate for an area which is effectively residential in character elsewhere. The maximum height of the building is 11 metres from the ground area, and you'll note from these that the site itself is slightly elevated through the natural topography of the ground as it stands. These are some CGI, some 3D renderings of the south elevation, which gives you a clearer indication of how through the use of dormers, insets, and variety of materials, the longer elevations of this building are quite successfully broken up. And this is a view as you would come in to the front of the building, this being the main elevation here, and you've got the car park in front and so a covered area for cycle parking in this area here. And there is one external terrace on the building, but that looks out towards the road rather than looking to some of the closer neighbouring properties. These are some sections through the site that just show the site in relation to the neighbours. So you've got north-south at the top there. So the properties here are on Hazelwood Close. And then, so it's very hard to read that, hence I've actually printed this out to try and make it a little bit more legible. But it does help to give an indication of how the levels and the heights are in relation to neighbouring properties. So obviously, whilst the building itself is 2.5 to 3 stories, because it's set a little bit lower in relation to some of these properties, it doesn't look out of place in terms of height. This building here is on Gronow Close here. So this is the east-west elevation. So that is going across this way, and this one here is going north-south. This is showing the landscape strategy. So there will be some additional tree planting and understory planting at the rear of the property. And basically the building's surrounded by some terraces, some water features to create some gardened areas for use of the residents. And the mature tree belts will be retained on the south and east boundaries. There's also a compound here for air source heat pump on the north side, so that's adjacent to the primary school boundary. The site shows at the front here 22 parking spaces, including 2 disabled spaces. You've got 10 covered cycle spaces. And in terms of accessibility, the site is about a 0.9 kilometre walking distance to the train station. And Honiton Bottom Road, which is the road where the existing access, which is to be reused, will be taken from, is served by the 367 bus, which circulates hourly. So there are genuine opportunities for people to either be walking, cycling, or using public transport to access this site. There have been some concerns raised about the adequacy of the parking provision and also potential congestion at the site access. Devon County Council have reviewed this, and they've taken into account that it formerly was a school, so that would have had peak traffic uses coming and going at the same time as the primary school, whereas with a care home, the sort of the staff changeover times tend to be at different hours than you would normally expect with school uses. And generally, the traffic flows, other than staff coming and going to these care homes, tends to be relatively low, and particularly visitors, very intermittent, spread out throughout the day and the evenings. This is showing the drainage strategy. Again, there have been some concerns raised about drainage. There are a number of SUDS features included on the site, so 6 rain gardens, 2 tree pit drainage areas and permeable paving and drives. And below ground, there's a network of geocellular tanks to attenuate flows from the site, meaning that flows will be reduced by about 97 to 98% from current level at times of heavy surface, well, effectively rainfall. And Devon County, the lead local flood authority, have reviewed the drainage scheme and have no objections to it. This is the proposed external works plan, and that is I think actually the main thing this shows at this scale is the solar panels which are proposed in the flat area. So whilst the roofs appear pitched, in the central area of the roofs is a flat area where the solar panels will be located. So this shows the visibility displays from the site, which will remain as it currently is, and Devon County Council have taken the view that this is adequate for the site situation and likely traffic levels. And these are just a series of swept path analyses to show how refuse vehicles would access the site, how ambulance would access the site, box vans, and smaller vans, just showing that the site is suitable for manoeuvring. So looking through the site, so this is views into the site from Honiton Bottom Road. So this is looking directly into the existing and proposed access. And these two trees here are the TPO trees at the front. This is showing the mini roundabout at Honiton Bottom Road. And this again is a view directly into the site. So the access is here. So looking into the site from Honiton Bottom Road, you can see the houses to the south visible here behind these TPO trees that run around here. This is views into the site again, and that shows the effectively brownfield nature of the site in the fact that you've still got the foundation plates of the buildings that were previously there. This is a view of the north of the site, so looking sort of across that way from Honiton Bottom Road. And this is looking north, so straight down Honiton Bottom Road, showing the mini roundabout with the site just on the right, past that mini roundabout. And as you can see, so within the area, there's the sort of typical, so across the area here, you've got bungalows, and elsewhere you have 2 stories. So there's a bit of a mixture in terms of the general prevailing height level of surrounding residential development. This is a view from so this is from within Gronow Close, looking sort of northwest-north. So looking, as you can see, the direction of this arrow where this photograph was taken, so showing the tree belt on that boundary. And this is from Brand Close, looking west-southwest. So again, looking through the trees on the site through this area here. And this is a view from Holly Close, looking north. So you can see there the development site is behind this belt of TPO trees. And this is the view from the corner down here, looking across, of Hazelwood and Holly Close, looking northwest-north, again showing TPO trees behind the houses. So the officer report sets out effectively the general assessment of this scheme. I think one of the key aspects here is that the application was supported by a care needs assessment, which identified a shortfall of 183 beds within Honiton, and that need is predicted to rise. So there clearly is a need for care homes within the area. And that is supported by Strategy 36 of the local plan. The emerging local plan and the MPPF all support provision of care homes, acknowledging the need to be providing for housing for people in their older years. There is obviously conflict with the emerging local plan in that the emerging local plan allocates this site for 30 houses. However, the local plan carries greater weight than the emerging local plan at the moment, which has highlighted a need for care bed provision within Honiton that need has not yet been met. The site is a brownfield site. Obviously, we have policies that encourage development within brownfield sites. The site was previously a school, so we need to consider the loss of that potential community use. That school has been successfully relocated. It was a special needs school, so important for the area, but that has been relocated elsewhere. Devon County Council have not indicated any need to retain this site for education purposes. The traffic impacts, I know there have been concerns raised in that regard, but the site is genuinely accessible by means other than the car, particularly for employees, but also potentially for for staff and for visitors. The impact on residential amenity, obviously the site is surrounded by housing on three sides. It is felt that the surrounding tree belts offer sufficient protection effectively against overlooking to those properties, also having regard to the fact that there was previously an active use on that site as a school. Once occupied, residential care homes tend to be relatively quiet places, other than the sort of the general comings and goings of staff and visitors. So the officer view is that the impact on neighbouring amenity is acceptable. Furthermore, the design and scale materials are also deemed to be acceptable within the area and in keeping with the general character, notwithstanding the fact that it is obviously a larger scale building than the surrounding residential properties. There's no objections raised with regard to impact on trees, ecology, drainage, and the officer view is that this scheme will deliver much needed care home within Honiton in an acceptable manner, and it is recommended for approval subject to a number of conditions. You will have seen in an update sheet that was circulated to members at the start of committee that there are some additional conditions proposed beyond those in the published committee report, which all relate to ecology. The ecology comments in the committee report do indicate that the officer report, the ecologist had had some reservations, I suppose you might mention, about some of the ecology details. They've now been submitted. The ecologist is now clearly stated that they have no objection, subject to the additional conditions being added, which are conditions 8, 9, 10 and 11 on that list, and also the BNG monitoring fee to be secured via a Section 106 agreement. So on that basis, the application is recommended for approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Wendy. Right, we come to the objectors now. Penny Hartop, welcome to the meeting. You have 3 minutes.
So good morning, councillors. I am here to address 2 critical areas where the proposal will severely impact our community and our infrastructure. The proposal is for a massive 70-bed 3-storey block on an elevated prominent site overlooking an area exclusively of 1 to 2-storey bungalows and houses 3-metre high bungalows facing an 11-metre building with this proposal. At 0.51, this small half-acre site is the smallest, most cramped site Frontier have ever developed on or proposed to develop on. All previous Frontier developments of this exact density and bed size have been constructed on much larger plots of 1 to 2 acres in size. Furthermore, Frontier's proposal does conflict with the earmarked idea of East Devon for this to be a preferred housing allocation for needs for affordable homes for local people. Honiton is registered on the Housing Deprivation Register. The Devon Home Choice Registry states there are currently 2,985 households, families and individuals actively seeking registered on the Social Housing Register in East Devon. Currently, the housing affordability gap in our area is 8.5 the median local salary, with the local elderly demographic relying on fixed state pensions and standard occupational pensions. In stark contrast, Frontier's luxury builds are designed exclusively for premium, self-funded residents with fees starting at £1,200 to £1,500 a week. This proposal will not serve the actual needs of the local elderly, and it completely undermines Frontier's claims that the development will alleviate local care. Instead, it will exacerbate the chronic housing shortage in Honiton, and it will deprive local families of desperately needed affordable social housing. The development also will pose an unsustainable burden on the NHS services locally. The primary health care provider, Honiton Health Centre, has a patient list of 18,000 residents. Currently, when the surgery has reached capacity calls for daily appointments, patients are routinely informed to call back the following day, attend Honiton MIU, or call 111 in an emergency. The impact of dozens of highly dependent multi-morbidity elderly patients into a single site will cause a disproportionate immediate spike in daily GP demand. Unlike normal community daily health care needs spread across an age groups, a 70-bed care home will require intensive, constant medical intervention and acute clinical oversight that local primary care cannot absorb. Without a fully funded 24/7 NHS clinical team dedicated to care home residents, the burden will shift to Honiton's local district nurses and emergency rapid response teams, effectively starving vulnerable local residents living within the wider community from home visits and nursing resources. For these reasons, I urge the committee to refuse this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Anne Passmore. You have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm here to address 3 further critical failures in this application that to introduce unacceptable levels of risk in our environment and our community. Impact on mandatory biodiversity net gain. We are aware that there is an active holding objection on the mandatory biodiversity net gain measures, BNG, because the application, BNG, baseline, metric is inaccurate. It includes both unmapped woodlands and leaves out protected trees. It has been stated that the true impact on local habitats is completely unknown and that the statutory legal mandatory validation requirements under Article 7 have failed to be met. The protection of trees and structural stability, due to the need to shoehorn in this development into a half-acre site, it clearly conflicts regarding the preservation of the ancient protected pendicular oak T15 and stated BS 5837 standard. It has been formally stated that moving the entire building further north would be preferable, yet the layout and development remains unchanged. Even worse, due to the tight boundaries and the soil mixture, the developer has stated that heavy pile driving or bore piling is necessary. Together, these issues pose unacceptable levels of uncertainty and risks that will be borne environmentally by protected trees and habitat, along with the risk of local properties as consequences of pile driving, which methods have yet to be decided. Finally, Frontier have been allowed to submit this application for recommendations on the absence of a full waste audit statement being in place. Instead, Frontier are being allowed to work out waste details later with a pre-commencement condition instead. The idea of working it out in the future proposes unacceptable levels of uncertainty and unacceptable risks to the community, especially as Frontier current drainage plans rely on flow controls that have not yet to be proven. This is at the same time, South West Water actively refusing to take the resulting runoff water. Voting for this development with the above identified failures, omissions and errors means that you are voting to accept the risk of flood to low-lying neighbouring properties. I strongly urge you to uphold this objection and refuse this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, Jordan Rundle, supporter, is he here?
I've got a statement.
Okay.
This statement is on behalf of Care Concern Group in capacity as the proposed operator and expresses strong support for this planning application and sets out significant benefits this scheme will bring to the local community and the wider health and social care landscape in the area. The proposed development will deliver a modern, purpose-built care home, providing both residential and nursing care for older people and operated to the highest contemporary standards of care environment, supporting residents to live with dignity, comfort and well-being. There is a well-documented and growing undersupply of high-quality, future-proof care home beds in the wider Honiton area, and there is significant statistical need for the more future-proof accommodation in the catchment to cater for demands of the growing local ageing population. This development directly addresses that gap. The scheme has been specifically designed to meet modern care standards, including ensuite accommodation, dementia-friendly environments, and appropriate clinical infrastructure for the nursing care needs, providing a sustainable long-term resource for the local population. The proposed care home will be a significant employer in the local area, spanning a wide range of roles, including registered nurses, care assistants, activities coordinators, catering and housing staff, and management and administration positions. These are predominantly permanent local recruited roles, contributing meaningful to the local economy. It is our intention to operate a home that is not only a high-quality care environment for its residents, but a positive presence within the local community. I strongly urge the local planning authority to grant planning permission for this development. The scheme addresses a genuine and urgent local need for future-proof care bed provision, delivers substantial and lasting employment opportunities, and will make a significant contribution to the health, well-being and social infrastructure of the community. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Wendy. And I should have said that Jordan Rundle is from Care Concern Group. Honiton Town Council now, Councillor Robert Fowles. You have 3 minutes, Councillor Fowles.
Good morning, councillors. I represent Honiton Town Council in opposing this application in this location. Good idea, wrong place. Those of you who can read a map will know that the map is not the ground. What you see on paper is not always the whole picture in reality. 31 specific objections have been raised against this application. They're all material considerations, and yet they've all been dismissed. Some questionably. For instance, the expectation that most places will be filled with Honiton residents already signed on with healthcare providers. With Care Concern Group charges typically $78,000 to $91,000 per annum, Honiton residents would have to sell their properties to fund these levels of charges. More people will therefore come into Honiton and sign up for healthcare, further increasing the pressure on trying to get an appointment. The map is not the ground. Those of you who watched the video sent through to you all yesterday will realise that the traffic survey was not carried out at the school start and finish times that the residents are so concerned about. The map does not reflect the reality on the ground. Access to the sewerage system from the proposed care home may be fine on paper, but the sewerage works in Honiton is reported to be 70% over capacity. That section of the River Otter and downwards is classified by the Environment Agency as poor ecological status. These levels of pollution are destroying the river's ecosystem. Discharges out into the sea are damaging the tourist economy on which we all depend. EDDC's own water cycle study identified Honiton as the worst treatment works in the region for capacity versus demand. I urge this committee to back the Strategic Planning Committee in not supporting larger applications such as this one until South West Water cleans up their act. Currently, no reduction of phosphates from the treatment works at Honiton are reported to be planned. The map is not the wider view of the ground. Before it's built, consider this. We fall over ourselves to look after trees, flora and fauna, but what about the people? How do you evacuate in an emergency around 25 frail and elderly residents excuse me, on each of the upper floors in the middle of the night with only 6 or 7 staff on each floor, and you can't use the lifts? One last thought. Consider the quality of life for those on the upper floors, who at best will be largely confined to their floor and at worst to their room, due to the staff numbers unlikely to be out in the fresh air and in the gardens for the benefit of their mental health. Perhaps this is not so much a care home as a warehouse for the needing higher levels of care. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fowles. Now the applicant, Max Paddock, Frontier Estates. You have 3 minutes, Mr. Paddock.
Thank you, councillors. Thank you, Chair. Just for clarity, the site is 1.23 acres in size, not half an acre as stated previously. Thank you for the opportunity to speak this morning. The application before you today will deliver a modern, purpose-built care home, providing both residential and nursing care to Honiton and locality. To be clear, this is not a retirement community. I know East Devon has become a magnet for retirees, but these are not the people who are moving into this care home. Care Concern Group, whose letter you've heard, will operate the home, and they operate homes across the country, from Exeter up to Matlock in Derbyshire and up in Scotland as well. They're a big, good, well-resourced operator, with CQC guidelines above good and above across all their homes. Their residents tend to be people who already live locally, who are no longer able to live independently, but still want to stay where they have friends and family. There is a pressing need for this type of home in East Devon and in Honiton, as is recognised by the Devon Market Position Statement 2025. The district has an ageing population, but even today, demand for spaces far exceeds supply. Many care homes in East Devon have closed over the past 10 years, and many more are likely to close because these older homes no longer meet the modern standards of care. So there is a need for this provision in Honiton. Having been through an extensive consultation process, I know the site's immediate neighbours have concerns. So I'd like to use what is left of my time to briefly address a few of these concerns and have 3 short points to make. Firstly, traffic. The neighbouring primary school can cause issues around pick-up and drop-off, that's not disputed. But the nature of a care home means it does not generate many vehicle movements. It is either staff or visitors. We will encourage sustainable travel, and shift changes can easily be manipulated, planned to avoid these busy periods. Overall number of vehicles will vehicle movements will be far lower compared to when the site was still operating as a school, and far smaller than alternative residential uses. Second, design. As your officer's report says, our proposals respect the neighbours' privacy and amenity. The care home has been designed so that it's set at a distance from existing homes, and there are mature tree bands along the boundaries which substantially hide the building from view. Third, drainage. The former school has lots of flat roofs and playground surfacing, which would have resulted in large volumes of surface water discharging into sewer when there was heavy rainfall. Our proposed drainage system will deliver a significant improvement and make sure there is no surface water runoff that might affect neighbouring properties by adopting SUDS features. Finally, construction. There have been concerns that pile driving during construction would cause disruption. We have assured your officers that we will not use driven piles here, precisely because there are homes nearby. Our engineers have recommended bored piles. This approach is accepted for urban areas and sensitive sites where people live and work close by. It is slower, quieter, and causes minimal vibration and disturbance. So to summarise, all technical consultees have now raised no objection, subject conditions, which are all agreed. We have worked hard with your officers, who have been really positive and proactive to resolve any matters raised during the course of the application. Such amendments include increasing the number of car parking spaces from 22 to 25, demonstrating SUDS features in our landscaping strategy, and provision of additional information regarding ecology, as well as considering construction techniques. It is a better scheme now as a result. I hope you agree that these proposals will deliver what Honiton and East Devon need, that the impacts have been carefully mitigated, and we have done our best to respond to the community's feedback. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Now we have the ward member, Councillor Roy Collins. If you have a microphone there, you can speak from there, Councillor Collins.
Have you had...
Can you go to the microphone, please?
Have you had my update
Yes,
from the
thank you.
25th.
We have.
Why
the
wasn't that
members-
sent out in the original
Excuse
documents?
me, can I ask members, have you all had the update from Councillor Collins this morning?
Yes.
Thank you, thank you. Right, Councillor Collins, we've all had the update. Yes.
Thank you, Chair. You've not received objections from Devon County Council because obviously they want to sell the site. They're selling the site, so they're an interested party. Don't take notice of what they say, because I can assure you that the road situation is dreadful in that area, particularly with parking. I went there last Friday evening at 7 o'clock to see 2 residents. I had a job to get through then because there was an evening meeting at the school. Cars were parked everywhere, right out to the end of Honiton Bottom Road. And 12 months ago, I made the mistake of trying to go through there at 3:30. And I had to stop and wait for a quarter of an hour before I could get through. No, I don't take notice of Devon County. South West Water sewage. In the road, a manhole cover came up, and sewage came up through the cover and went down the road and into the garages. The pipework cannot cope at the moment with the sewage, let alone when it gets to the sewage works. And then you know South West Water can't deal with it. The water table at the moment is 8 foot down. When the houses were first built in Marker Way, the gardens were always wet. Because the water table was so high. There's cracks in properties there. I have inspected, residents have called me in, and I've inspected cracks in several properties there. When the estate was built, it should have been built on rafts, and it wasn't. So any sort of pile driving or large equipment is going to investigate these cracks, and they will open up. Residents are so worried about this. The site was given to Honiton to build a school there many, many years ago, and it had a covenant on it saying it was for the benefit of Honiton. Devon County Council have contacted the previous landowners and got the covenant removed. This land is Honiton's, not Devon County's to sell off for profit. It should be given back. And as I put in my comments earlier, that it should be used to alleviate the parking problems. When Littletown School was built, it was only for the local residents round there. Now the children come from miles away to be dropped off there and picked up, which is causing the problem. The planning department does not seem to have taken the objectors, the 31 that have sent in, seriously. They are very, very upset, I can tell you that. I've had objections coming on my iPad while I've been sat at this meeting today. I've had several. And I've I wanted to say at the start of the meeting that I've been lobbied for the last 12 months on this. And if you grant planning permission to Frontier, money will be taken out of the town. It will not be coming back because they're a national one. It'll go on to profit them and build more care homes elsewhere. There's no benefit for the town. What we need in this town is people to be cared for in the local communities. That's what we need. Last Thursday evening, I went to Honiton mayor making, and they gave a Citizens Award to Winnie Cameron, who set up an organisation which helps 81 carers in this town to look after people in their own homes. That's what we really need. People do not want to go in care homes, I can tell you that. I had a case in February. A lady had been in hospital for 6 weeks and she needed to come out, and her son tried very, very hard to get a live-in carer, but she got put in the home at Axminster, and there she died a fortnight later. We do need proper care for our elderly residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Collins. And I'm sure most of us appreciate the comments you've made about care for the elderly, and some of us also about land which has been gifted to a town. We had ours in Exmouth with Roll College and we lost that. So we do have some sympathy. Thank you. Now, members, questions? Councillor Barlow.
Thank you. I read my own writing here. Care beds. So there's 70 care beds going in. Is there an equivalent of houses? So in the local plan, it's down for 30 houses. I think there is. From memory, it's 27 and a half. First of all, is that right? That's my first question. Would 30 homes cause, or would you, when you look at the planning of it, would that cause less traffic or more traffic than a care home in that position? Yeah, I think that's it for the second.
Well, if you had 30 homes, if you averaged it at 3 beds, because there'd be a likely mix, 2, 3, 4 beds. If you averaged it at 3 beds, then that would be 90 beds. If you had 30 homes. Obviously, I mean, I'm very much speculating there, but as an average idea. Traffic, particularly so with residential homes, you'd expect the number of traffic movements to be greater, but I think more importantly, the peak hour rush is likely to be more aligned to the peak hour rush at the school, because people tend to leave for work and school at the same sort of time. My view, I'm not a highway engineer, but my view is that I think that this use is likely to generate less traffic conflict issues than if the site were developed for 30 homes.
Councillor Smith.
I'd be interested to find out if anybody here knows where the data for the Honiton shortfall, specifically of 183 beds, has come from. I know in the adopted plan, Honiton was allocated for 50 care places.
Could you speak up a bit,
Sorry.
Simon? I'm thinking about people at the back.
Of course, yeah. Sorry, I was just looking for where the data, the 183 beds, has come from, because I know in the adopted plan for Honiton it was allocated 50. Now I know that's over a decade period in the past, and there may well have been closures of other homes and other factors. I'd be interested to also know about occupancy rates. So when is a home considered full? And that can really alter the numbers as well, whether that's 80%, 85, 90%, because that's a big factor in this, isn't it?
I'm very sorry. The last bit, I was too busy looking for the bit about the number of the 50. So the last bit about 95%.
Sorry, that was about occupancy rates. So at what point is a home considered full, for example? And so if that's 85% or 95%, then obviously that affects when something is considered full, and so therefore has a knock-on effect. So if Honiton might turn around and go, oh, we've got 3 full care homes, when actually that might be 85% full, or the figure might be closer to 90%, which gives a more accurate representation. We might not have that information. I just wanted to ask in case.
Okay, thank you. Through you, Chair, I think it might be more appropriate for the applicant to respond to those questions, because the figure of the 183 bed need was taken from the care needs assessment provided by the applicant.
Could you come up to the microphone again, please, Mr. Paddock?
Hi. Yeah, so the need factor for Honiton itself is been pulled together by our consultant HPC, who've created the need assessment for the local area and the district. That looks at East Devon as a district and also Honiton as a catchment. It looks at the existing homes already in the market, the number of beds provided by those homes against the demographics of the local area, based on a sort of 3-5 mile catchment, depending on the population density. So obviously, if you have government data setting out the population, a proportion of that population will be of a certain age group, demographic that will be requiring care beds. I think it's normally sort of north of 80 years. And those numbers are then put into the demand piece, and the suppliers of these offset against the existing beds provided as it stands within the market. Does that answer your question? And then obviously there's the district data as well, which we have for East Devon, which comes from, sorry, from the CQC, the Care Quality Commission. In terms of occupancy, the homes normally run, so a new build home anyway, will normally run or be considered stable at about 85% occupancy.
Okay. Councillor Davey, can you turn your microphone on, please? Thank you. Councillor Davey.
Thank you, Chair. I've got 3 questions, actually. The trees are shown in the plans as being higher than the building. Are they shown to scale? Do we know their height relative to the height of the building? That's my first question. My second one is, there's been a lot of concern about pile driving, and I know the applicants have assured us that they will use a kind of more neighbourhood friendly method, but I just wondered why they're necessary in the first place. Why do they need to drive in piles? And the last one is, do we know how much medical care will be provided on site? Because there's also concern about the impact on local doctors, surgeries and medical facilities. So I'm just wondering how much would be done on site and how much might require outside intervention. Thank you.
Could I ask Mr. Paddock to answer the last 2 questions, please, about the pile driving and the medical care?
Certainly, just to be clear, it's a piled foundation solution, not a driven piled foundation solution we're talking about. So there are many types of foundation solution. Piling is used where the ground isn't particularly stable at certain depths, so you have to go a little bit deeper to find the stability to be able to build off. In this circumstance, we're not using driven piles, which can be quite noisy and has caused concern obviously locally, but we'll be using board or rotary piles, which instead of sort of banging them into the ground, you're basically you're using a sort of slow drilled method, which essentially takes longer, costs more, but provides the same outcome in terms of stability of ground to build off. Regards to the medical care provided in the home, obviously there'll be nursing staff within the home providing medical care where required. As part of the sort of consultation process, we obviously met with the Town Council many times, and many of the members here. And the Town Council did actually refer this back to the GP surgery because one of the concerns raised was the impact on GP surgery, and the GP surgery at the time said that there was no objection to what we're proposing, essentially talking about having 60 plus residents from the locality in one place where you can visit easily, rather than having sort of singular call-outs to single homes. It's a lot more efficient delivery of care than it would be if all these members were receiving home care at home, essentially. Does that address?
Thank you. Yeah. And the trees one, Wendy?
So the maximum height of the building itself is 11 metres. Wendy, could we possibly have the slides up? Because I'm just, so for example, here, so the maximum height is 11 metres to the ridge level, but obviously the height of the windows, the highest windows are below that. I would say at least a metre below, so you're looking at the window height. And then obviously that's the top of the window, the height that somebody might see, you know, halfway through that window is sort of where you might get head height of somebody in the room. So I think it's reasonable to say that in terms of the potential for overlooking, you're probably looking at the sort of height of, you might have a person maybe maximum, I would have thought 9.5 metres above there. Now the levels do change on the site, and so it's, you know, the levels are sloping down, and the trees are on the site boundaries. So there is going to be some level of variety of the height trees, but generally I would expect mature trees of this type, and if we just go to the photographs, to be well in excess of 10 metres in height. If you're looking at the, so this is the bank of trees here. Obviously, some of these trees are deciduous, so there were, you know, it will vary, you know, throughout the year. But generally, I think the height of the trees is going to be sufficient to mean that any loss of privacy would be to an acceptable level. You know, if there were any windows viewed, there would be intervening branches, trees, except even in the winter months. So the officer view is that it's an acceptable situation, particularly bearing in mind we are within an urban area and there was a school on this site previously.
Thank you. Any more questions, members? Councillor Bailey. Sorry, I can't take any more.
Thank you, Chair. I was wondering, having heard the representation from the applicant, it seems a very expensive care home from prices that we were quoted. I wonder if any provision could be made to make it more socially accepted for the less financially well-off of the community. For example, may I just say, when we do a building development in general, we would put down a percentage of affordable homes as a matter of a condition. Would that sort of condition apply in this case? Thank you.
No, we wouldn't be able to apply such a condition for two reasons. The first reason being that we don't have a policy that requires care homes to provide an element of them at a more affordable rate, but also it's a single. Affordable homes are taken over, they tend to be delivered and managed and run by housing associations, so specific companies, and they will own those houses, they will maintain them, they will get the tenants in, and etc. In this situation, it's a single building run by a single occupier who is not an affordable care home provider. So there is also the logistical things that it would be very difficult to do that in any event. But the most important element being is that there is no policy justification for us to insist on any element of this being delivered more affordably.
Thank you. Councillor Hunt.
Thank you very much, Chair. The first question I was going to ask is very much what Mr. Councillor Barlow has already asked about the impact of the occupants of 30 houses versus care homes, but that's already been answered. My question relates really to the capacity of the sewage treatment plant. We've heard that it's already 70% over capacity. Do we know of any plans by South West Water for any upgrades of the sewage system?
South West Water haven't raised any objections to the proposal. And without going away and looking in more detail, they haven't mentioned that whether they, I mean, they have got a programme of works, but I couldn't tell you at this precise moment whether or not that proposed. My understanding is that Honiton has been identified for some upgrades, but I also believe that the management of surface water runoff into a lot more infiltration as opposed to the surface water going into any combined sewer would help to alleviate pressures from, as I said, bearing in mind the site housed a school, which would have had sewage and runoff, and we have allocated it for 30 houses, which arguably would have more bedrooms than the 70-bed care home that was being proposed. And I understand that South West Water are aware of all of our emerging allocations and are putting that into their development plan in terms of making sure that there is adequate capacity to deal with all of the emerging allocations through the plan.
Okay, did you want to come back?
No, I also thought that houses would make more sewage, as it were, than the care home, but that's fine, thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions, members? Councillor Barlow?
Just a point of information that South West Water have no plans up until 3035, which is the ones they've done to do anything in Honiton at the present time.
Thank you.
So that was
So-
all out of Grampian condition then?
That all the questions? Right, members, moving to debate then. Anyone got anything to say? Councillor Gazzard and Councillor Bailey?
Thank you, Chair. I am disappointed that this application is before us today, bearing in mind, as it's been said several times, that in our strategic plan, this site is earmarked for 30 homes. And I would have thought that 30 homes was more important than building a care home. I'm also really concerned about, and I know our officers have responded the best they can regarding what we've heard about the runoff and the sewage problems. So I am concerned about that. Also, nothing has been, I can't see it in the paperwork, so if I've missed it, I do apologise. I can't see anything in there about any S106 money being awarded to the NHS, i.e. for hospital care or for the extra pressure it will put on doctor surgeries. So, all in all, I haven't made my mind up yet, Chair. I will listen to the debate, but I do have severe reservations about the application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gazzard. Do we have anything on section 106?
The NHS haven't requested any Section 106 contributions, and there's no specific policy requirement for Section 106 contributions. And as has previously been said, the local GP surgery and certainly inspectors, when they've looked at other appeals for care homes, take the view that they often see care homes as reducing pressure on medical services because these are people who are being cared for. There are nurses in there looking after them. So people are far less likely, I would imagine, to have falls, if they're feeling uncomfortable or unwell or concerned, to be calling medical, calling out the ambulance, etc., when the nurses are there on hand to be able to identify if there's a genuine medical emergency or not. So there's, and as in terms of routine, any need for routine doctor's visits, as the speaker recently mentioned, the doctors are able to combine their visits in one single building as opposed to doing home visits throughout a much wider geographical area. So care homes are considered to often be reducing pressure on NHS services. So again, that's a further reason why we wouldn't be asking for contributions towards the NHS.
Thank you. And regarding the site itself, Councillor Gazzard, I think it was vacated around 12 years or so ago. And I asked the question about as to whether any other application had come forward for the site, and my understanding there's been none. So nobody's come forward with anything. Councillor Bailey, now I'll come to you in a minute. Councillor Collins, Councillor Bailey.
Thank you, Chair. With the site being allocated for 30 houses, and with our residents in East Devon, there's over 2,000 people on the waiting list. One of my own family members has just got a property now, and she's been on the waiting list for 7 years, which is, I can assure you, is a very long time to wait for a house. Regarding no applications for this to put houses on the site, I believe this council had a policy of building 500 homes in the area, which was passed at Cabinet last year. Surely it would make more sense that this council was to take over that land and put some of those 500 houses they propose there on that site for the benefit of the young people of this area. And I want that question answered, please. If not today, in the not too distant future. Thank you.
We're here today to consider the application put before us, not whether or not there are other alternatives for the site. The fact that it is an emerging allocation is something that is, and obviously, if we put a care home on this site, then there is the loss of that land in the emerging local plan. But that allocation has limited weight at the moment, and there is a clear identified need for care home places, and the adopted plan does support the provision of care home beds within Honiton. So this is supported by the adopted local plan, although there is conflict with the emerging local plan, but the adopted plan has greater weight.
Yeah. Thank you. Councillor Davey.
Thank you, Chair. I think it is important to ensure that we understand this is a care home, not a retirement home. And I've spoken out against retirement homes before because the people who come to retirement homes often come from outside the area. They want to retire to a nice part of the country. Whereas care homes tend to take their patients from a fairly local area. And obviously those people are probably living in a house at the moment. And so it does actually quite often free up housing. I think Councillor Barlow asked a question earlier, which I don't think was answered, but care homes do count towards our housing allocation, I think. But it's not a one-for-one, is it? It's I can't remember what the ratio is, but it does count. And unfortunately, we're not debating the merits of two different applications. It is identified in the emerging local plan for housing, but there's no actual application there. We're not debating whether we should prefer one over the other. So there's no guarantee those 30 homes would come forward. And given the outcry I've seen about the amount of traffic, I rather suspect that we get exactly the same arguments coming forward if 30 homes were proposed in there, because that would generate an awful lot more traffic. And as Mrs. Ormsby said, probably at the kind of peak times that schools also do. I think I read somewhere this home could care for patients with dementia, and we do know there is a severe shortage of places for patients with dementia. A lot of homes won't take them. So I think that also counts in its favour. I've seen the traffic problems. I've had photographs and videos sent through to me, and I find it rather sad that so many children travel to school by car. This is a school in the middle of a town. You'd have thought that most children could walk to that school. But I think it was Councillor Collins who made the point that children are coming from all over to attend these schools. And of course, that's what happens these days. Parents are free to choose where their children go to school, and they can choose a school miles away. And then accept they're going to have to drive them every day. So I find it rather sad that so many children are being taken to school by car. And I was sent a video yesterday, but I did notice that was a wet day. And I do think on a wet day, you're more likely to get more children being brought to school by car who might otherwise walk or cycle or scooter, but they don't want to arrive at school soaking wet, and I have some sympathy with that. I think the question for us is, will it exacerbate the problems of the traffic that we've seen? I don't believe so. The applicants have already stated that staff and visitors, I would imagine, can avoid those sort of peak times, so they're not going to be turning up at the same times. And I think if they did, they would very quickly learn, like Councillor Collins, to avoid peak times outside the school. So I think that it's not going to add to the traffic problems then. While I sympathise with those problems, I don't think it's going to make things any worse. And I think if 30 homes were proposed there, we'd hear exactly the same arguments and probably with a lot more justification.
Thank you, Councillor Davey. Councillor Collins, you have something to add?
I've been handed a note by Councillor Foles. Penny Hartop sits on the patient participant group at Honiton Surgery. If you've allowed the applicant to speak, she would like to speak and answer any questions you have about.
No, I'm sorry. We stick to the procedure, and procedure is that the applicant is able to represent his company, and we've all and if speakers wish to speak, they should register with Democratic Services beforehand. So, anybody else? Councillor Bloxham.
Thank you, Chair. I've read all the objections. I saw the traffic problems yesterday on the video that we were all sent. I'm listening to Councillor Davey here, and I have to agree with him. As you all know, I'm ward member for Cranbrook, and we have lots of development going on at the moment all around our education campus. Probably a few hundred homes being developed there, and an extra care facility being developed, and we have all the same issues. But it is sad. Life is car use. People have to drop their children off to school on their way to work, so they can't always walk there. I'm 25-minute walk to the school from my house in Cranbrook, and if I had children, if it's a wet day, would I be walking them there? So I mean, I'm really struggling on this one too. I understand all the issues that people have raised, but I think a care home would be better than the houses. And the only thing I would say on the construction side, I noticed on the Kemp, it didn't actually specifically say that no construction traffic should be allowed during school pickup and drop-off time. And we do have that in Cranbrook, that they are not allowed construction traffic. We can't control other traffic, but we can control construction traffic. Is not allowed for a period in the morning and at school pickup time, and that might be worth adding as a condition if this one actually is passed.
Yeah,
thank you.
Yeah, I would say we have no objection from Highways. Were we to refuse this application on Highways grounds, we'd be overruled by the inspector at appeal. So, Councillor Barlow.
Thank you, Chair. I think most of the points have been answered. As you say, Highways have got no complaints. South West Water says it has no complaints. I think that's the only thing that I am slightly concerned about, is what do we do about South West Water? They say they can take it, but our own water study shows that we are 70% over capacity at that works. There are no planned works to be done, so we can't put a Grampian order on it because there's nothing planned, so that's unrealistic. From all the other things, you know, there used to be Millwall School there. They had 80 to 90 pupils, plus 30 to 40 staff there. So there would have been more cars coming and going for that. And that was 12 years ago. So admittedly, the neighbours, etc., have had 12 years with a nice field or empty space. And as I've said many times before, including myself, we are all NIMBYs. We don't like change on our doorstep that we think is going to be detrimental to us. It's unfortunate though, our job is to look at the bigger picture. Our job is to say that we do need care homes in the area. Sidmouth just had a very big one, 120 homes in Sidmouth, which again was miles more than we thought we needed. And we lost that at appeal. And I think that's been mentioned before, where if you go to appeal, they look at the things, they look at the facts. The facts clearly state, A, it's needed. Secondly, that there is no objections from highways, no objections from South West Water. And I think we would be brave to go out and say that we don't agree with South West Water, although we may not. I don't know what Wendy has to say on that matter about South West Water and about the sewage, but other than that, I can see no reason and no way that we could actually fail this or not pass this, not support it. It's just causing more cost for everything. It's going to go to an appeal, and the appeal will overturn it. Thank you.
Was that a proposal? Okay, I think also our water consumption has changed over the years. At one time, when I was a kid, we used to have a bath once a week. Now people shower at least once a day, perhaps. But I think certainly our water consumption usage has changed. Right, anyone else? Councillor Hunt.
I'd like to say something a bit more positive about this development, actually. I was quite pleased to see the environmental features, the solar panels, and the way they've actually been included within the roofing so that they're not actually visible. I thought that was a really nice touch. I'm really glad to see that there's going to be a heat pump. But my question is relating to the heat pump, and is there soundproofing around that? If we could see that on the map, it's on the corner there. It's next to the school, I think. Is there a condition? Well, there isn't a condition, but could we put a condition that there's adequate soundproofing for the heat pump, please?
Environmental Health did comment on the application and raised no objections to it. It would be possible to put a condition on to say that they need to demonstrate whether there's a need for any acoustic measures to prevent disturbance from the air source heat pumps, and if so, that it be provided.
Yes, I'd be happy with that.
Thank you. Councillor Bailey.
Thank you, Chair. It's just a comment on what Councillor Barlow was saying about South West Water. Not so long ago, this council passed 2 resolutions, one to protect the rivers and one to protect the oceans. And if we're going to persist with all these applications and approve them, we're not complying with those resolutions, because we're putting extra pollution into the rivers, into the sewage works in Honiton, which is far from adequate, as we know from independent reports that we have received, not from information from South West Water, which are bound to say it's all right anyway. They're legally obliged to do connections. They're not going to say no. So I think we ought to take more notice of the independent water cycle report that we received not too long ago, rather than the inaccurate things that South West Water are saying. So I still would like a building embargo as we did years ago, as you remember from years ago, Eileen. And that was very effective. And I think it's relevant to this. This is a big development, and it's going to produce a lot of, you know what, because of the nature of the building and the nature of the people in them. And so I can't really feel I can support it on that alone. Thank you.
Thank you. But the previous use was a school, and it was school for children with special needs as well. So the consumption would have been even higher. And
that was 12 years ago.
yes, but it's still, you know, I mean, it'd be difficult to refuse on those grounds. Councillor Barlow.
Just on the heat pumps, I just wanted to say that heat pumps obviously cause noise, which destroys me. During the day, when Environmental Health go out to do their testing, especially in a school, there would be an awful lot of noise in there. And again, and at night, when the school is empty, when the noise would be, then I think that's the reason probably why they've got no issue with that. And again, on the sewage, you've got permission for 30 homes there. They would create a lot more sewage and a lot more runoff than a care home. Although that doesn't solve the problem as to whether they can deal with any extra, which I think Councillor Bailey has a very good point. What should we do? Who should we believe? Obviously, that comes down to the officers, experts, and I presume the tilted balance, even though it's not necessary because it's thing, but we are providing equivalent homes, whether it's, I think it's, am I right, 27.5? For some reason, I have that in my mind, that 70 care bed home, you looked at it, it's somewhere in the report, it said 27.5 houses equivalent. Is that correct? In which case, does that come off or add to, or help our housing shortfall?
Can't see anything.
I'm not seeing it.
No. Can't see
Sorry, I
anything.
can't. I mean, I'm looking at strategy 36. I mean, one of the comments it does say is that extra care home proposals will be acceptable on sites allocated for residential development. So I think either way, it's, I mean, this is the adopted local plan that is saying that.
Yeah, I'm sure. I think the point that we as a committee are always being told is that our housing balance, which is causing us so many problems with the tilted balance, does this affect that? Will it come off? Will it reduce it? Because otherwise, you know, the argument again for houses is stronger because we need to get to our acceptable 5-year plan. And at the present time, as we all know, we're about 3.25 years, I believe it is.
Okay.
which again, if that is true, if it is 1.8, then it makes, actually this is better than putting 30 homes on there for our housing balance, which is one of the things we have to take into consideration.
Yeah.
To move it along, Chair, I'm happy to recommend support as per officer recommendation.
Thank you, councillor
second it.
Barlow.
I'll second it.
And
I'm happy to second.
councillor Bloxham, second. Thank you. Can we go to a vote, please? All those in favour of the recommendation?
Is it?
What we're waiting for.
The proposal?
No, I'm saying we're not waiting for when to come back with anything further.
No, I don't
So,
think so.
yes, well, I have finally. So, yes, the answer to your question is that C2 care bed homes, which this is, can count towards 5-year housing land supply, and the ratio is 1.8 of, at the ratio of 1.8 adults per household. So, yes, they do count.
Good. Thank you. Thank you.
So the proposal recommendation is approved conditions and the section 106 agreement with regards to the BNG
Yeah,
fee.
there's no section 106, is there?
So there's a proposed section 106 for the BNG monitoring fee, £8,030. There's been mention of 2 possible additional conditions. Councillor Bloxham suggested a condition, or the Kemp condition, being amended to include an exclusion of construction traffic delivering, going to and fro the site during school drop-off times. And Councillor Hunt suggested a condition requiring effectively that an assessment of a noise impact assessment, effectively, of the air source heat pumps be provided, and if necessary, if it identifies the need for any acoustic mitigation measures, that they be provided prior to occupation or the heat pumps being brought into use. But then Councillor Barlow did mention that he, you know, looking at it, and I could see that it is on the northern boundary, which immediately adjoins the education premises. And I think the arguments that Councillor Barlow put forward were quite sensible and are likely to have impacted the Environmental Health Officer's assessment that schools, if people, it adjoins the playground, and inherently they're very noisy when they're in use. And when the schools are not, you know, when outside of school time, when it's quieter, then it's on that northern boundary, so there would be no occupiers of the building to be disturbed. So again, that's for members to decide whether they feel they do want that additional condition in or not.
Thank you, Wendy. Before we do that then, first thing is to check whether Councillor Barlow actually wants to include those 2 additional conditions in his recommendation for approval, because he's the one who's put forward the motion so far.
I'm very happy with I'm happy to put the second one in. I don't think it's necessary, but again, it's just double crossing and making sure there is no problems in the future. So I'm very happy for both to go in.
Happy to second that, yep. Okay, on that basis then we can move to the vote, Chair, thank you.
Right, all those in favour of the recommendation?
6.
Those against? 3 against. And 1 abstention. Yes, I was just going to suggest, can we take a 10-minute break back at 25 to? Thank you. Right, we'll start the next application then. It's agenda item 10, planning application 252444, full application, land south east of Townsend Plantation, Southley, pages 76 to 96. The recommendation is to approve and adoption of an appropriate assessment. Senior Planning Officer? And Andrew Dickson?
Sorry, Chair, could we just interject before we do that? Basically, the sheet that you've been provided with the recommendations is incorrect, actually. Apologies.
Is it?
Yes, it's actually, the recommendation is approval with conditions.
With conditions?
Yes, that's it. And no
Thank you.
appropriate assessment,
Yeah,
as I understand.
okay.
Thank you.
Okay, no appropriate.
No, it's just approval with conditions.
Yeah, okay, that's fine. Right, Senior Planning Officer Andrew Digby is going to present this.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members. This is an application for retrospective approval of an Earthline slurry lagoon. Before we go into the details, I've got a few updates. Comments from Councillor Parr have been received in support. They were circulated on Friday the 5th, but they're not in the report. The report talks about tree felling, but I understand that the licence that's been granted is for tree thinning, and we'll see that in the photos later. The drawing has been updated, so the report talks about a rectangular form not matching the rounded form that's been constructed on site. We've received an amended drawing which is in the presentation, so we'll see that as well. Moving on, the site is in the countryside to the south of Southley. As you can see, it's in red here, in the corner of a field with good tree cover all around. This green line here is a public right-of-way, and the black lines are public roads. The land to the north of the bridleway is ancient woodland, whereas the land to the south surrounding the site is conifer plantation, which, as I mentioned, has a licence to be thinned. There are two access points. There's one outlined in red here going through the woodland and another one along here. This is the amended drawing, so you can see the rounded form, which is clear in the photos we'll see in a minute. The proposal includes the erection of a fence around the top. This hasn't been done, but that is part of what is being sought in this application. These sections show the original land forms. There's a gentle slope on the site. And then these give you an indication approximately of how the levels have changed, but that will be clearer in the photos. And to put it in context, this plan shows the contours around the site. So you can see that the land slopes from west to east, going downhill this way. Here we have Stockham Farm, and here Virtue's Vineyard, two residential properties. Concerns have been raised about overtopping, leakage, potential collapse. Regulations are in place to ensure that those things don't happen, but if there was an incident, then the overland flow route would be down towards the river here. But as I say, this is an unlikely event. The lagoon has been constructed in accordance with the regulations and has been inspected by the Environment Agency. So here we have a view looking from the end of the track towards the lagoon, and you can see how the land has been built up. You can also see extensive tree cover all around. In landscape terms, there's no adverse impact. The site is well screened from public vantage points all around. This drawing shows how the land has been banked up, but it also has grassed over and blends in well with its surroundings. And similar in this view, although the building up is a bit more pronounced in that view. The report talks about potential damage to the hedge bank at one side of the site. This was mentioned by the tree officer and landscape architect. It's not entirely clear the extent of the cutting into the hedge bank, but the tree officer and landscape architect are satisfied that compensatory planting would be adequate in this case, and there's a condition to secure that. And this is the view from the public bridleway, looking down the track towards the site. The woodland, the plantation on the right has been thinned, and there's no view of the Slurry Lagoon, which is down here beyond the trees. The proposal meets an agricultural need. It's to serve a farm and its land holding in the vicinity of the site. There will be some movements between the farm and the site, but this would be offset by not by the lagoon being located near the fields where the slurry would be spread. The landscape impact is acceptable. We've seen extensive tree cover, and the potential damage to existing trees can be compensated by new planting, and the Environment Agency have supported the application. It's also important to note that assessments on impacts on SSSIs and SACs and ancient woodland have been undertaken, and there's no adverse impact has been identified. So while there have been concerns raised about pollution and leakage and overtopping, regulations are in place enforced by the Environment Agency to ensure that firstly, the lagoon has been constructed properly, and that the applicant is responsible for ongoing maintenance. So, in the absence of any identified harms, the proposal is recommended for approval, subject to the approved plans and a condition securing compensatory planting. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Digby. Now we have objectors. Christopher Norman. Welcome to the meeting, Mr. Norman. You have 3 minutes. It's the right-hand switch. It's not working. It's not working.
Oh, there we go.
Otherwise, that's great.
And then when you finish, just turn.
Okay. Yeah, good afternoon, and thank you. Yeah, we initially became aware of the slurry pit construction. It was in late August last year. There was a lot of noise going on over several days, quite close to our property. It's a large pit. I mean, it's half the size of a full-size football pitch. We notified the council on the 27th of August last year, The enforcement officer didn't visit until the 15th of October,
Councillors, please.
and I'm sorry?
No, it's
Sorry.
all right.
That's okay.
There was talking going on.
Okay,
Carry
I'm
on.
sorry. Okay, thanks. Thank you. Until the 15th of October, and the enforcement officer asked the applicant to submit a retrospective application, albeit that the pit hadn't been finished at that stage and the work was still ongoing, and I think it's actually still ongoing now. I reported to the environment officer at that point, sorry, the enforcement officer at that point also, that there was no fencing around the pit, and therefore there was a danger to wildlife and walkers, you know, walking into it unbeknown to them as to what it was. But no action was taken. The pit's now been operating for several months. I think the council placed a lot of weight on what the Environment Agency has said in reaching a decision. However, reading the Environment Agency's comments, they say that the lagoon visually appears to have been constructed in accordance with all the regulations in terms of the construction standard, materials, etc. I mean, that sounds to me as though they've just sort of gone out and had a look at it. There's no evidence I've seen to validate how they can validate that statement. For example, there are no professional engineering drawings signed off by a qualified person. They also say they've run soil tests as well to check the permeability, but again, I've not seen any evidence of those soil tests. There are other regulations, SSAFO regs, which say that the pit has to be designed to last for 20 years, and that's around things like the tank base, the walls, the channels, the pipes. And again, I don't see how without engineering drawings you can determine whether all those things are actually have actually been achieved. The same applies with another piece of legislation, the Reduction and Prevention of Agricultural Diffuse Pollution regs, and that deals with leakage, overflow, flooding, etc. Again, how can you validate that without proper technical drawings and a geotech survey? I think the council need to ask themselves, have they got enough information to make a decision that all the regulatory requirements for the construction have been met?
Can you wind up now, please? Because I've allowed for you the time that you've lost, and you've had nearly a minute now. Okay.
Sorry, am I over time or?
Yeah. Well, you are, but can you just finish off now?
Oh, sure.
please?
Okay.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Okay. Okay. I mean, it's not covered either. It's not been covered. So you've got potential nuisance and the smell coming from the pit. And the access statement, the original access statement, said that that it was all going to be used in neighbouring fields, the slurry, and there was going to be an umbilical slurry spreading system. And then I see on the website more recently that isn't the case, and it's going to be used in areas where the pharmacies fit.
Okay.
So it's inconsistent. And the highway signed off on, presumably on the original proposal, not this new proposal.
Thank you. Can you finish now, please,
Sure.
Mr. Norman?
Well, could I just, sorry, just make one more point? Is there time for that?
One more point.
Well, yeah, there's also a previous pollution offence which I think occurred several years ago, which and the applicant that's still been investigated, and I spoke to the Environment Agency, but nothing's been concluded, and that was 4 or 5 years ago, which I think is quite strange.
Thank you. Thank
Okay.
you. Thank you,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Norman. Thank you. Nigel Cairns, please. 3 minutes, Mr. Cairns.
Do I need to press the button again?
Yeah. No, it's all right. Oh, yes, you better, yes. Can you switch it off and switch it on again, please? Thank you. Thank
Right.
you.
Good afternoon, Chair and members. My name is Nigel Cairns. I'm the owner of Strockham Farm, which adjoins the application site and lies downhill from it. I ask you to consider one central question before making your decision today. Do you have enough evidence before you to be satisfied that this retrospective development has been properly addressed? This is not simply a proposal for a future development. The lagoon has already been built and has already been operating for a considerable period of time. That makes the quality of the supporting evidence even more important. My first concern is that Natural England originally advised that there was insufficient information available to determine whether significant effects on the Beer Quarry caves, special area of conservation, could be ruled out. Natural England required further assessment, including consideration of habitats, regulation issues and air quality impacts. The committee should ask itself whether the information now before it is sufficient to justify a conclusion that there will be no adverse effect on this internationally protected site. My second concern is that the application repeatedly relies on slurry being distributed through an umbilical spreading system. Yet the applicant's own agent has now stated that there is nothing set in stone showing where the slurry will be applied. If the receiving land is not identified, how can the committee fully assess the environmental effects of the operation? Indeed, how can the Environment Agency have been able to do so if they didn't have the information either? Because this lagoon has already been operating, I respectfully suggest that the committee should know where the slurry has actually been spread during the period it has been in use. Without that information, members cannot properly evaluate impacts on adjoining land, biodiversity, water pathways, or local amenity. My third concern relates to the Environment Agency response. I fully accept that the Environment Agency's views are important and should be given weight. However, planning judgment remains the responsibility of this committee. The agency's position should not remove the committee's obligation to satisfy itself that the evidence is adequate. The officer report places significant reliance on the Environment Agency's conclusions. However, members have not been provided with the underlying technical material on which those conclusions are based. For example, I've not been able to identify within the planning documents any detailed engineering specification, professional design certification, geotechnical assessment, or comprehensive evidence demonstrating how the lagoon's long-term containment performance has been verified. Members are therefore being asked to place considerable weight on conclusions without being able to examine the underlying evidence for themselves. Finally, there remains uncertainty regarding water pathways. The committee should be satisfied that any watercourse relied upon in the assessment has been correctly identified and that any potential pollution pathways has been properly understood.
Can you finish now, please? Mr.
Yeah,
Chair?
just one more paragraph, if that's okay. Given the site's topography and the fact that the neighbouring land lies downhill, I respectfully suggest that these matters deserve careful scrutiny. Chair and members, my submission is not that the agriculture should be prevented from operating, nor that slurry storage is unnecessary.
Can you finish, please?
Yeah. If members are not fully satisfied on these points, I respectfully ask the permission to be refused or deferred pending further information and a site visit.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Cairns.
Do I press the button
Yes,
again?
please. Thank you. Right, the agent now, Lucy Brooke. We have 3 minutes.
Chairs, members, thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm here on behalf of Mr John Reid to ask you to support this retrospective application for an earth-line slurry lagoon serving the established dairy enterprise at Scroll Barton, including Gaze Farm. At its core, this application is about enabling a long-standing local farm to meet modern environmental standards and to continue operating responsibly within the East Devon national landscape. This is not a speculative or unnecessary development. This lagoon was built to meet clear and direct requirements from the Environment Agency. Without it, the farm simply cannot comply with current regulations governing slurry storage, water quality and nutrient management. Refusing permission would not remove the need, it would leave the farm in a position where it cannot lawfully or sustainably operate. The benefits here are tangible and significant. The lagoon allows slurry to be stored properly and applied at the right time, rather than when capacity pressures force it. That means there's less risk of pollution, there's better protection of local watercourses, there's improved soil health, and there's reduced reliance on imported fertiliser. In short, it delivers exactly the kind of sustainable, environmentally responsible farming that national and local policy both seek to support. There have been no objections received from Environmental Health or the Environment Agency, and no significant impacts identified in the air quality report. I also want to address the main concern around pollution risk very clearly. This lagoon has been constructed in full compliance with the SAFO Regulations 2010. Independent testing confirms the site's clay's subsoil provides a natural impermeable barrier. This is not a workaround or compromise. It is a recognised compliance solution under the regulations. The lagoon is functioning exactly as it should, safely containing slurry and reducing rather than increasing environmental risk. At present, the regulations do not stipulate a cover needs to be in place, but we are aware this will be a future requirement. The lagoon is able to accommodate a cover in the future. On landscape impact, it is important to view this in its proper context. This is a working farm within a national landscape where agriculture is intrinsic to its character. The lagoon is low-profiled, earth-banked, grassed over and constructed from natural materials. There were no imported materials used for the construction. It sits comfortably within its surroundings and reads as part of the farmstead, not as an intrusion onto the landscape. Members, this is essential infrastructure that allows a local farming business to do the right thing, to comply with environmental regulation, to protect water quality, to farm sustainably, and to remain viable. These are clear public benefits. The Earthline Lagoon is and will continue to be used by the applicant's farming business only. It will not be used for the storage of imported slurry from other businesses. Approving this application is not just a technical decision. It is a decision to support responsible farming, environmental protection, and the long-term stewardship of the national landscape. For all of these reasons, we respectfully ask you to support the officer's recommendation and grant planning permission. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Paul Arnott. You have 5 minutes, Councillor Arnott.
Thank you, Chair, and I'd just like to admire what Lucy just said, and perhaps in another application it might be relevant, but reading on this one, I'm afraid it comes across as greenwash. In March this year, this council passed a Rights of River motion, and one of the key pledges was to ensure that rivers were free from pollution. Now, this motion and people's support for it didn't just come from nowhere. In my own ward in 2020, a landowner started operating a slurry pit before this authority was able to sign it off for operations. Almost immediately, the lagoon wall breached and 100,000 litres of raw sewage fell into the Southley Brook, thence to the River Collie and the liminal parts of our own Seaton wetlands. 6 years on, as far as I and the EDDC planners have been able to establish, the landowner has not been successfully prosecuted by the Environment Agency and has faced no consequences. So what would you think, members of the Planning Committee, if 6 years later, the same landowner, having been refused permission to build another slurry pit, went ahead and built one anyway? And then, cynically, applied for retrospective permission. Well, members, this morning you are presented with exactly the same cast of characters associated with that 2020 ecological disaster, which killed fish, birds and the riverbed in Collie with effects lasting years, the River Collie. I note this information was redacted from your report. So it's against this background that this application has to be considered. Now, as the two public speakers there said, and I would associate myself with everything they said, the officer report depends almost entirely on the Environment Agency saying it is satisfied that this meets the required standards of slurry storage. Meanwhile, our officers write that it provides on-farm storage for the wider farm holding. Members, today you have been provided with no sufficient or compelling evidence to support those assertions, either orally today or in the report. Following an inspection, the Environment Agency say, on the 5th of November 2025, and review of supporting soil testing, the Environment Agency has confirmed that the lagoon visually appears to have been constructed in accordance with the relevant construction standards, and that the materials used meet the required thresholds. There's no evidence for that. Now, I've been asking through officers for months for approaches to be made to the Environment Agency for the necessary documentation to support those assertions to be provided. I believe it hasn't happened so far. And if you look at the report that you've got here, over and over again, there are things that are red flags. The agent mentioned the willingness to provide a cover. This application is being put in so they don't have to put in a cover legally next year. There is mention of transportation of slurry in existing tracks. Now, it may or may not be the case that this is providing a facility only for the landowner's own land. I don't know. Have we got an affidavit saying that it's not coming from anywhere else? Whose assertions? Which evidence are we accepting here? So in conclusion, Chair, I was minded to ask for a site visit because I think you need to see it, because there is absolutely clear evidence that it is already breaching and that further down the slope there has been leakage. You can see it there, although cleverly that area seems to be planted now. But I think actually, in order to expedite this, what I would ask the committee to consider is just an outright rejection, and then that this council, given the account that's been given by the member of public of our failure to enforce, actually meets its enforcement obligations. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Arnott. Members, questions? Councillor Barlow.
So it's, people keep mentioning about the fact that there might be sewage coming from elsewhere to the site. Does that make any difference? I thought the idea was...
Had to be licensed, yeah?
I thought the idea was we need to clear up the sewage, whatever. Oh, not the sewage, the slurry, that's the right word. Slurry that we're looking to put on the land so that it doesn't flow into all the rivers everywhere. Does it make a difference on the licence whether it comes from just that farm or if it's the next door farm? Otherwise, I presume they'd have to put in a slurry pit as well. So does that make any difference or not?
This is to meet the applicant's needs. So it's serving Squirrel Barton, as we heard, and Gaze Farm, which is just to the south. The motivation for constructing this is because they have regulations to comply with. They have their own need to store slurry. This isn't about bringing slurry in from elsewhere. If they were, the only impacts that we would be considering would be transport, vehicle movements. But again, that's limited in terms of the capacity of the slurry lagoon. This isn't a development that at any time would result in large numbers of vehicle movements.
Just one other question, if I can, Chair, to one of the applicants. I think it was Mr. Kern said he was the farmer locally. What sort of farm? What sort of farm is it you run there, sir?
He's not the agent.
I wasn't the agent, sorry, it was the other. I know the dairy
Oh,
farm
right,
obviously
go
is,
on
is
then.
where it needs a sewage, but the other farmer said that he was a farmer. I just wondered what sort of farm.
Which is not an operating farm. I have unimproved grassland and I have some rare breed geese, but it's not a commercial operation.
Okay,
All right, thank you.
thank you. More questions? No more questions? Am I right in thinking?
Councillor Bailey.
Yeah, I'll come to you. Am I correct in thinking that this only came in as a retrospective because the enforcement officer went out? Did I hear that?
Yeah, it was brought to our attention.
So it wouldn't otherwise, it would have gone unnoticed apart from the local people.
Quite possibly.
Thank you. Right, Councillor Bailey.
Thank you, Chair. It would appear from looking at this report and from what was submitted by Councillor Arnott, the ward member, that there's a lot of supposition in this. There is no evidence that it was built to the standard. There is no evidence that it's going to be in a position where it's not going to leak and it's going to be safe and sustainable. It's all supposition. I agree with Councillor Arnott because, as I mentioned earlier on the last application about the rivers and the sea, this is not going to help the situation. And the track record from this particular farmer regarding slurry operation is far from impressive. I think he's thrown caution to the wind and a bit of a gung-ho attitude to this
Do you
council.
have a question?
And my question is, what are we going to do about it? That is my question.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. On Friday, it wasn't until Friday evening, I sent an email to officers. It was too late, asking for an Environment Agency officer to attend today. But it was such short notice, and for that I apologise, but I didn't even think of it. I'd read the report, I'd read Councillor Arnott's objection, and I became quite alarmed by what I'd read. And I mean, where I've underlined this, and Councillor Arnott read it out, and we haven't discussed it. The Environment Agency, no more questions. Yeah, the Environment Agency has confirmed that the lagoon visually appears to have been constructed in accordance with the relevant construction standard. Well, how do they know? They didn't know until after the thing had been constructed. We don't know how dense the earth was, which surrounds this lagoon. And the rule is, and it's a legal requirement, that whoever constructs a slurry lagoon must tell the Environment Agency at least 14 days before they start work. This wasn't done. Now, something else that came to light when I was looking back over this, I was looking on the computer, is that there are government grants for slurry lagoons of between 25,000 and 250,000 that can be applied for. So it seems to me that it's quite a lucrative business. And the old saying comes to mind, where there's muck, there's brass. And in this case, there's a lot of brass, it seems, whichever way, metaphorically as well, I think. So I'm very concerned about this. I can't support this application at the moment, but I'll wait and hear arguments to the contrary, perhaps. But I'm very concerned that the Environment Agency have been, shall we say, timid in this. They have no teeth. They come in afterwards, have a look. We don't know. They don't know. to what standard this thing has been constructed. And I wouldn't feel happy, safe even, in supporting this application. Councillor Gazzard.
Actually, we've got...
Oh,
Yeah, all right.
thank you, Chair.
Ilovich.
I'd like to echo some of the comments that you made. I personally am not confident in my own mind that I can make a decision on this today because of the lack of information. Now, whether we defer it, Chair, until we get further information, technical information, or as Councillor Arnott has said, is that we get the information and we also do a site visit, because I think that's important as well. But I will listen to what other members said, but in my own mind, I don't feel that I'm in a position today to make a final decision today. So I will hear what other people have to say, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Gazzard. Councillor, Wendy, you wanted to come back.
I just thought I'd make comment because I think it's likely that you know, one of the concerns that is likely to be discussed in debate about this issue is the level of detail that we have supporting this application. So with a retrospective application, obviously we view it in the same light as whether it's not, whether it's a proposed or retrospective isn't material. We routinely get applications for slurry stores. We deal with many of them because there is a grant scheme in place to make it viable and affordable for farmers to introduce them, because it's a very good way of minimising pollution into the environment. So it's something the Environment Agency is very supportive of. And the level of information that we have with this application is very similar to the level of information we would get with any proposed slurry store. The assumption being that there are strict regulations that sit outside of planning that control how they are built. And I would refer you to paragraph 201 of the MPF that says the focus of planning policies and decisions should be on whether the proposed development is an acceptable use of land rather than the control of processes or emissions where these are subject to separate pollution control regimes. Planning decisions should assume that these regimes will operate effectively. Equally, where a planning decision has been made on a particular development, the planning issue should not be revisited through the permitting regimes operated by pollution control authorities. So what paragraph 201 is telling us, that it is not our role to be investigating in detail whether other controls by other bodies, in this case, the Environment Agency and the various regulations that affect the construction of slurry lagoons are being complied with. The EA would not routinely visit a slurry store to check how it's been built. We, as officers, would not check to see how a slurry store has been built. So I think we need to be cautious that just because this is retrospective, that we are not expecting a greater level of detail or a higher bar in terms of the information given to us than we would for any other slurry store, of which we approve many on a regular basis. Thanks.
Thank you, Wendy. That was helpful. Thank you. Wait a minute. Ollie and then Ian.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think the reason there are grants for slurry lagoons is that some time ago the Environment Agency required control of slurry spreading times. As Mrs. Ormsby said, it was actually to control the amount of pollution because farmers were getting a build-up of slurry and having to spread it at times when there was high rainfall and it simply washed off into the rivers. So it was actually an attempt to persuade farmers to store more slurry on site in order to be able to store that and spread it at more appropriate times. Yes, and Mrs. Ormsby has drawn our attention to paragraph 201 of the National Planning Policy Framework because I also looked at that. And it's not our job to know whether the engineering aspects of this have been done in accordance. That's like us trying to be building control. We're not. Our concern is this in an appropriate place? Is it going to result in excessive highway movements and so on? And as Mrs. Ormsby said, it's to assess whether the development represents an acceptable use of land, having regard to the characteristics of the site and its surroundings, while assuming, and we do have to assume, and we could be cynical about that, that separate pollution control regimes will operate effectively. In other words, it's not our job to decide whether this has been appropriately constructed. That's the Environment Agency's job. And if we've got an issue with how they're performing their job, then we need to take it up with them and not attempt to control that through the planning system. So I'm afraid I cannot see good grounds for refusal of this. The Environment Agency have taken a site inspection, and there's also soil testing has demonstrated the in situ clay is suitable and meets the required permeability standards. So although the Environment Agency couldn't obviously investigate the construction of the lagoon because it was already full of slurry, it would appear that they are satisfied that the underlying soil was sufficiently impermeable for that lagoon to be constructed there. So I'm afraid I cannot see reasons for refusing it.
Thank you, Ollie. Councillor Barlow.
Thank you. Ollie has said much of what I was going to say. I was just going to state the facts on river pollution, that we are, as we have said before, as Councillor Arnott said, we have made a motion to protect our rivers. 20% approximately-ish comes from sewage works, 20%. 60+% comes from agriculture and agricultural runoff. The reason that hundreds of these are built in the southwest and across the country, probably thousands, is because if we want to clear up our waters, that's where we need to concentrate our efforts. It's easy to pick on Southwest Water, it's a company. Farmers, there's an awful lot of them, and they can be very vocal, and they're usually big and butch, so you don't want to mess with your farmers. But we need to work with them to enable us to solve the problems in the rivers. And I am surprised that this has been brought to us. When I looked at it first, I'm thinking, well, why is it here? You know, as you quite rightly point out, NPPF 201, it's not our job. It's like if we have a retrospective for an extension. We can't go and say, well, has he put the footings in? That's not our job. That's another person's job. So, I don't even know why it's here. It looks in all the photos, I'm sorry, but if you go back to the photos, you can't see it. I think it fits in there very nicely. It's doing a job that we want it to do. The water track would go down between quite a long distance between pumps till it gets to a water course. Fair enough, it is going to run downhill, but there is quite a lot that would be going. It doesn't go directly to a farm, the way you showed us, Wendy, on the farm. I see no reason why we shouldn't support this. And things like, again, I think we're being slightly narrow-minded when we're saying, oh, it's supposed to be rectangular, it's a bit rounded. I don't know if anyone's ever tried to build something like this, but trying to get a dead, it's not a swimming pool. This is a farmer trying to make a living in very tough times, and with I know they get a grant, but you don't. He's got to put fencing up around it. Fencing's not cheap. Building all this stuff isn't cheap. Making the track isn't cheap. So yes, they're getting money, but believe you me, I doubt if they're making a profit out of it, and it's something they've got to do to survive. So I am very happy to make a motion that we support this as per officer conditions.
Right. Do we have the seconder, please? Ollie. Anybody else want to speak on this? Councillor Gazzard?
Sorry, Chair. Could I just come back to what Mrs. Ormsby said?
I mean, yeah, this is a retrospective application, so we have to look at it as if it's a brand new application. In my view, and the time that I've been on this committee, is that if a new application came in, we would have supportive documentation. Now, we haven't got that with this, so I'm still conflicted because I'm being asked to make a decision, and I don't think that I've got all the information. So at the moment, I still feel that I can't support it. But I'm looking at it, Chair, as retrospective, but obviously as it would have been if it had been a new application that came in and we were looking at it today. And I don't think that we've got enough information to be able to make a decision on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bailey.
Thank you, Arlene. Carrying on from what Steve's saying, it wasn't that long ago that this committee refused this application. So,
Not this application.
so I beg your, in that case, I apologise.
Councillor Barlow.
I just wonder, again, going back to it, what information would we normally have on a normal application for a slurry tank, slurry pit, that we haven't got on this? Because I'm slightly confused. I mean, if there is information missing that we would normally have on a normal slurry pit, on a new application, if this came through, what is it that we're missing, just so that I'm aware in case I've made a horrible mistake and need to withdraw my proposition?
We're not missing anything. The level of information provided is what we would expect in a proposed development.
So it's exactly the same as what we'd normally pass without even coming to this committee. Thank you.
Yeah. Councillor Hunt.
We're not missing anything because we've had the report from the Environment Agency, but were the Environment Agency in possession of all of the facts when they made their assessment? Because my feeling is that things changed somewhere along the line.
Sorry, is that to me or sorry?
No, it's to officers.
Through you, Chair. Do you think that the Environment Agency, when there's a slurry pit put in, goes out and inspects everyone before they go in and does this? Or do you think it's like the pollution incidents we have all over the country that I think are much more serious, that you're lucky to get 1 in 10 investigated? Because if you think someone goes out and inspects everyone and then goes back and checks the farmer's done exactly what they're supposed to do, there has to be some sort of test check between it. If there is a leak, then you get the Environment Agency go out.
Thank you.
Fair point.
Do you want to comment on that?
Just to add that, as far as I'm aware, the Environment Agency did visit in around November, I think.
Would it be normal for the Environment Agency to check that the correct procedures are being carried out?
Bear in mind that in most cases that would happen after we've granted planning permission. So the requirement to notify the Environment Agency would come after we've granted permission. So we don't know what their normal operating practices are.
If I can, for information, Chair, I think the Environment Agency will go out before the grant is paid. So in other words, well, no, but this is true. The government will be very keen if they're paying £25,000 to £200,000 per pit, that the pit has been built, that it has been built to the standard, that it's got fencing around it, etc. That's the amount of checking they would do, I would suggest to you.
Can you use the microphone, please, Councillor Arnott? You can use the one where you are. Oh.
It's a genuine point of information. This council, I think on the 9th of January, wrote to Lucy, I believe, asking for the supportive evidence from the Environment Agency. Did we ever receive that? And the answer is no, I think.
We haven't had any information from the Environment Agency other than what's in the report saying that they visually inspected it.
In January this year, planning officers thought it was significant enough to ask for sight of that. It hasn't been provided. So
in that case, would the committee support that we write to the Environment Agency expressing our concerns?
Chair, first of all, I've made a proposition. I don't know if we'll get to vote on that, but more importantly, in a normal application, would you expect, other than a comment from the Environment Agency, they have no issues with it, would you expect them to do anything else? I mean, or are we saying this is separate, this is different, and therefore, because it's retrospective, I don't know. Can you explain, please? Because if we're supposed to deal with this as a new application, why are we changing the rules?
This is no different. We consulted the Environment Agency, they're happy with the proposal.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Is it your wish that we write to the Environment Agency expressing our concerns?
Is this, we write to them as a note afterwards that we're very concerned that all slurry pits are not inspected before, pre and during construction? Or what are we actually saying that we want to write to them about?
I mean, it's a legal requirement that if somebody wants to build a slurry pit, they have to give 14 days notice before the work starts. In this case, they didn't do that. It's a legal requirement, therefore they've broken the law. So what are the Environment Agency doing about it?
Is that not?
Could I perhaps just interject? I think the thing to say in this is that we've obviously consulted with them, as we normally would do. We consult with various consultees. They choose whether or not to respond. If they respond, we take their response into consideration. If they don't, we determine the application on the basis of the available evidence. That's what's happened on this occasion. I don't see any reason particularly to be writing to them further. We've written to them, we've asked them for some further information, they've not responded. We've proceeded on the basis of the available information. Thank you.
Well, they seem a pretty toothless body to me, you know?
Sometimes they respond, sometimes they don't.
Nothing followed up. Anyway, we've had a proposal which has been, oh, sorry, Simon.
Sorry, I would just like to hear whether the officers did think that it was worth pursuing and whether there was a communication that was made between officers to the applicant to ask for that detail, because I think that's quite important.
My understanding is that the case officer was asked by the ward member to ask the Environment Agency to expand further on their comments. So and that's what the officer did. Is that correct?
I had a conversation with the ward member, and we talked about the Environment Agency's role. So I followed up with the agent to ask whether they had any more information about how it was constructed. But as we've heard, the regulations are in place that can control the construction. It's not our place to dig into how it was constructed.
Thank you.
I do sympathise with you. It's very hard having a boxing match with the front row the whole time. It's in your package, for heaven's sake. If you've looked at the planning application online, on the 9th of January, a former planning officer, no longer works here, so I won't name her, wrote to Lucy, who's sitting here, and asked for the supportive evidence that had come from the Environment Agency to justify them telling her and Mr. Reid that it was okay. Now, if it was deemed, and that wasn't under my influence at all, okay? So if it was deemed sufficient enough for an East Devon planning officer to ask that on the 9th of January, why is that now deemed irrelevant? And it's on the planning application website.
A point of information, I presume if the ward member has asked a question, that's probably why they asked the question in the first place.
I have to say, I'm struggling to find anything on the website. For this application? Apologies, we have found the email, but it appears that the applicant's agent did reply to the questions raised.
Councillor Davey.
I'm just on the NFU website here. It says, as part of an EA inspection, farms will need to provide information on slurry storage dimensions and capacity. During the inspection, the age, structure, overtopping list, quantity of storage, and any signs of potential pollution or runoff will be assessed. So we know the Environment Agency have been out there, they've actually looked at this one and they are satisfied. And I really can't see why we're hanging about, quite frankly, because it's the Environment Agency's role to do this, and it's not our job to check that they're doing their job. We're doing our job as a planning committee. We're not here to assess the engineering qualities of slurry stores.
No, I don't think that's the issue. I think the issue is that although it's retrospective, it was carried out, and we have no evidence that the Environment Agency has checked it, apart from...
Chair, we're not allowed to criticise our own officers. Are we allowed to criticise environment officers? No, but
Environment Agency?
Sorry?
The Environment Agency?
What, generally, or the officers? We
Oh,
have
no,
a
it's
report.
not personal.
We have a report. Well,
Never personal.
It is, because they're saying they've inspected it.
Anyway, can we crack on? We've had a proposal and a seconder. Can we take the vote, please? Approval.
All those in favour then, Chair?
1, 2, 3, 4.
5.
But can we make it quite clear, please? Can people put their hands up? Thank you.
1, 2,
5. Yep. All those against? 2.
2.
Any abstentions? 3. That comes to 10. That's right. Yeah.
Right. Thank you, members. And thanks to members of the public.